Chapter 1198. By the way, where did Wen Aohai go? Lin Sun suddenly asked. Rui Monrong was startled, and then her heart shook. Was Demon Lin worried that senior brother Wen Aohai would come back? It seemed that he wasn't completely fearless. Thinking of this, Rui Monrong took a deep breath and said, 2 days ago, senior brother Wen set off for the mythical fire battle tablet to take the test to enter the Tianjiao Golden List. Mythical fire battle tablet. Lin Sun had heard from Old Toad that there was a similar battle tablet in each of the upper 9 realms. Only by taking the test in front of the battle tablet could one be qualified to enter the Tianjiao Golden List. Can Extinction King realm cultivators enter the Tianjiao Golden List? Lin Sun asked in surprise. According to his previous understanding, only the top figures in the reincarnation developing realm were qualified to compete and enter the Tianjiao Golden List. Rui Monrong's eyes flashed with imperceptible disdain when she heard Lin Sun's question. Demon Lin didn't even know this. But sadly, even if she was disdainful, she had to answer because of Lin Sun's despotic power. Before the arrival of the Absolute Domain, the Tianjiao Golden List only appeared a few times in ancient times. At that time, there was no Extinction King realm cultivator. Therefore, only the top figures in the reincarnation developing realm could enter the Tianjiao Golden List. But it's different this time. It's an unprecedented era, and the Absolute Domain has become completely different. Now, the top figures in the upper 9 realms know that to enter the top 100 of the Tianjiao Golden List, one must have the strength of the Extinction King realm. Hearing Rui Monrong's explanation, Lin Sun finally understood. Rui Monrong left before long, and Lin Sun began to meditate. The day and night of adventure in the Styx Forbidden area had consumed a lot of his energy, and he still had the poison of the 6-winged blood mosquito in his body. Whoosh, sitting cross-legged on the pale golden ancestral source stone, Lin Sun was acutely aware of the surging and pure spiritual energy rushing into his body like a great river. He could easily refine it without any hard work. Amazing, cultivating here for a day is equivalent to cultivating for a month. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. It was worthy of the upper 9 realms. If such a blessed place for cultivation was placed in the outside world, it would be enough to cause all orthodoxies to covet and fight for it. However, there was no lack of them in the distant fire realm. Hualala soon, Lin Sun was drowned by the waterfall-like light rain of spiritual energy. He was like a big abyss, swallowing and cultivating crazily. Eventually, the entire stone hut began to emit strange rumbling sounds, like the rumbling of wind and thunder, or the sound of a Tao. The energy required to advance to the monarch realm was completely different from before. Just like now, the spiritual qi Lin Sun refined in one breath was equal to the power he refined in one day when he was in the reincarnation developing realm. Visible to the naked eye, Lin Sun's injuries and toxins were fading little by little and being repaired at an amazing speed. His entire person was faintly discernible in the rain of spiritual energy, holy and ethereal. If seen from the outside, the stone house where Lin Sun was located was like a huge whirlpool. As soon as the spiritual energy gathered from all directions, it would be swallowed up. Rumble. As the vortex revolved, a shocking rumble resounded, shaking one's soul. If one didn't witness it with their own eyes, it would be hard to imagine that this was caused by an expert cultivating. On the mountainside, a group of descendants of Beast's Mountain gathered. Looking up at the top of the mountain, their faces were extremely gloomy, revealing resentment, unwillingness, humiliation, and anger. This was originally the territory of Beast's Mountain, but now it was occupied by demon god Lin, who forced them to submit and become slaves. How could they not hate him? Senior brother Meng, when will senior brother Wen Aohai return? Someone couldn't help asking. Others also looked at the man in red. His name was Meng Yinghua, and he had a high prestige. Hearing this, he thought for a moment and said, "It should be no more than half a month." Half a month? Everyone couldn't sit still. It doesn't seem to take so long to break through the Tianjiao Golden List, does it? Now that they all regarded Wen Aohai as their only savior, they naturally hoped that Wen Aohai could return as soon as possible. No, in addition to breaking through the Tianjiao Golden List, Senior Brother Wen has to visit several major forces to discuss an important matter. Meng Yinghua's eyes flashed. What important matter? Someone couldn't help asking. I can only tell you that this matter is related to a heaven-defying creation that has been sealed for thousands of years. If it can be done smoothly, the benefits will be too great. Speaking of this, Meng Yinghua's eyes became scorching. Following that, his expression turned cold and gloomy as he said, "Everyone, don't be anxious. Bear with it for a few days. The day Senior Brother Wen Aohai returns from his mission will be the day Fiend God Lin perishes." Everyone nodded, and they were no longer depressed and desperate in their hearts. They knew that Wen Aohai would definitely return. At this moment, Lin Sun's indifferent and calm voice suddenly sounded. "Why are all of you gathered together? Didn't I tell you to dig in the mines? If you dare to be lazy, I'm afraid you won't be able to see your senior brother Wen again." These words contained the profound meaning of Pu Lao's roar. As soon as it resounded, Meng Yinghua and others felt so uncomfortable that they almost coughed up blood and saw stars. Damn it! Everyone's face suddenly became extremely ugly, and they almost gnashed their teeth with hatred. "Bear with it first, don't talk back to him." Meng Yinghua took a deep breath to appease everyone, and then he walked to the side of the mountain tunnel. Mining. In fact, it was to excavate the ores that contain divine gold in this mountain. However, these ores were extremely difficult to excavate. Even a King Realm expert couldn't move these ores, and they could only use sharp weapons to excavate them bit by bit. Moreover, the distribution of divine gold was uneven. Sometimes, the ores dug out after working hard for a long time might only be the size of a sesame seed. To put it simply, it was a tough job. In the past, Meng Yinghua and others didn't feel it was hard to dig, but now it was different. They were enslaved, and even the treasures they dug out had to be handed over to Lin Sun, which was too aggrieved. If the dignified descendants of Beast's Spirit Mountain were reduced to mining slaves, they would definitely be laughed at to death. Remember, if you dig less than half a kilogram of divine gold, then don't blame me for being rude. Lin Sun's voice sounded again, and it was so cold that Meng Yinghua and others almost coughed up blood with anger. Half a kilogram of divine gold? This was an unparalleled divine material, and they could burn incense to the gods if they could dig out a thumb-sized piece of it. Who dared to think about digging out half a kilogram? This was clearly forcing them to their deaths. Everyone, don't be impulsive. Bear with it for a while longer and let him be arrogant. Meng Yinghua quickly tried to calm them down. She was worried that the others would lose control of their emotions and do something inappropriate. Everyone took a deep breath and endured. The upper 9 realms consisted of 9 major realms. The distant fire realm was one of them. Apart from this, there were also the Waterage realm, the Qian heaven realm, the Kuan earth realm, the gentle wind realm, the Zhen mountain realm, the reverse lake realm, the thunder-shocking realm, and the extreme medium realm. Every realm was like a large world, and they were connected in the pattern of the 9 palaces. Among them, the medium extreme realm was the most special. It was also viewed as the divine pinnacle realm, meaning that it was a core area that was favored by the god. Moreover, according to past practice, the medium paramount realm would open in 8 years. In other words, only in the 9th year of the descent of the absolute nothingness domain would the experts scattered throughout the other realms have the chance to enter the medium paramount realm. This also meant that the powerhouses who had entered the upper 9 realms from the 3,000 worlds were now distributed among the 8 great realms, excluding the medium extreme realm. This obviously showed how many experts and powers were gathered in every single realm, and the competition was bound to be extremely brutal. Wen Aohai was very clear about this. At this moment, He was standing before an enormous stone stele. The stone stele was ancient, and it towered into the sky like a pillar that held up the heavens. It was completely pitch black, and strange and warped mysterious totems were branded on it. Every single totem revealed a different scene. There were the sun, moon, mountains, rivers, flowers, birds, insects, fish, and even the boundless universe and the primordial times. All of them were suffused with an ancient, grand, and divine aura. As he stood before the stone stele, he was like an ant looking up into the sky, and he couldn't help but feel tiny. This was the distant fire battle stele. Every single realm had a similar battle stele. Only by passing through the test of the battle stele would one have a chance of ascending onto the prodigy gold rankings. At this moment, it wasn't just one Auhai. There were a few tens of figures standing near the distant fire battle stele. There were both men and women amongst them, and all of them possessed extremely powerful auras. As they stood there, they were like numerous overlords of the king realm. Even if he'd stepped foot into the extinct king realm, when Auhai had no choice but to restrain himself and keep a low profile. Because all the experts present here were existences that had stepped foot into the extinct king realm. The auras of some of them were even more formidable, and it caused one Auhai to feel indescribable pressure. It's only been less than a month, yet so many extinct king realm cultivators have appeared. When Auhai sighed in his heart and he felt slightly heavy. What he saw before him was merely what he'd seen, and there were bound to be even more extinct king realm cultivators in other places. The grand era this time really is different from the past. Peak king realm cultivators that have never been born have appeared successively now, and it can be said to be unprecedented. When Auhai was originally very conceited. But now, he was clearly aware that only by advancing into the extinct king realm would he possess the ability to fight in the upper 9 realms. If he wanted to slaughter a path of blood through the crowd of extinct king realm cultivators, then he had to improve his combat strength as soon as possible. On the other hand, the fastest way to improve his combat strength was to search for and seize the heaven-defying fortune that had been sealed for countless years. Besides this, there was no other way. Fellow Taoist one, please come over for a chat before we leave. Suddenly, a voice transmission resounded by his ears. When Auhai raised his head and looked over, and he saw a figure that was covered in bright gold standing nearby. The figure's entire body emanated a raging and domineering aura, and it was extremely conspicuous. The 9th prince of the Golden Crow bloodline, Wu Lingfeng. He was the younger brother of the 7th prince of the Golden Crow bloodline, Wu Lingfei. But Wu Lingfei had been killed by Lin Sun, and Wu Lingfeng was now a extinct king realm cultivator. Moreover, there were currently 4 great powers in the distant fire realm, and they were like 4 overlords. Amongst them was the Golden Crow bloodline. Beside Wu Lingfeng stood a few men and women, and they were all extinct king realm cultivators from different powers. When Auhai's heart thumped, and he immediately nodded in agreement. He knew that what Wu Lingfeng wanted to talk about was absolutely related to the heaven-defying fortune that had been sealed for countless years. Chapter 1199. Not long after, when Auhai stepped forward to take the test. However, the result caused his heart to sink. There was no ranking. This meant that with his current combat strength, he couldn't be ranked in the top 100 of the Prodigy Gold rankings. When Auhai clenched his fists and took a deep breath to calm the unwillingness in his heart, he turned around and left the combat fire tablet. In the distance, Wu Lingfeng and the others were already waiting. Don't be discouraged. The competition in the upper 9 realms has just begun. A temporary ranking competition is nothing, said Wu Lingfeng. Wu Lingfeng said. Furthermore, there are only a few experts who are able to enter the Prodigy Gold ranking. These people have already grasped the Grand Tao energy to the level of Tao laws and have begun to seek the path to immortality. When Auhai was stunned. Is it possible to be ranked on the Prodigy Gold rankings only by grasping the Tao laws? Not necessarily. Even if some extraordinary kings haven't grasped the Tao laws, they have a high chance of being ranked on the Prodigy Gold rankings. Wu Lingfeng said, according to my knowledge, Qi Lingxiao was able to ascend to the 93rd position on the Heaven's Gold rankings in the Heaven's Heaven territory without grasping the energy of the Tao laws. 93rd. When Aohai's pupils suddenly constricted. This ranking seemed very low, but don't forget that in the upper 9 realms, there were many wonderful ancient freaks and heaven-defying geniuses. Being able to obtain such a name under the circumstances that he hadn't grasped the energy of the Tao laws could already be said to be world-shocking. More importantly, there were still many empty spots in the top 100 of the Prodigy Gold rankings that hadn't been occupied. Thinking of this, when Aohai felt much better. Brother Wu, have you been ranked? His heart shook as he looked at Wu Lingfeng. Wu Lingfeng smiled indifferently and said, I just grasped a Tao law and am barely ranked 98th. His words were casual, but everyone could hear the arrogance in his voice. When the other king realms heard this, they couldn't help but reveal a wisp of imperceptible envy and fear. It was not easy to be ranked 98. At least among the group of king realms, Wu Lingfeng was the first to do it. However, just as Wu Lingfeng had said, the upper 9 realms had only been opened for less than a month, so the competition for rankings was nothing at all. In the following period of time, as the strength of every absolute monarch increased, it would be the time to truly compete for the Prodigy Gold list. Let's go. I invited all of you this time because of the heaven-defying fortune within the Nether River restricted area. If we're able to grasp it, then all of us will have the chance to charge into a higher position on the Genius Gold rankings. Wu Lingfeng's eyes revealed a hint of fanaticism. 3 days later, when Aohai left the residence of the Golden Crows and began his journey back, he was very excited. Under Wu Lingfeng's call, there were already 7 Extinction King realms like him who had unanimously decided to participate in the search for the heaven-defying fortune. The time was set to be 1 month later. 1 month is enough for me to raise my strength to another level. There's also the star net fruit. When the time comes, it will also ripen. With this godly medicine, even if we encounter fatal danger in the Styx forbidden area, we can still save our lives. As he pondered, he could already see the outline of the star net mountain in the distance. When Aohai suddenly thought that a month had passed and the passage to the upper 9 realms had long been closed. At this time, demon god Lin should have already arrived at the distant fire realm, right? Thinking of this, when Aohai's heart surged with uncontrollable killing intent. In the burning immortal realm, under the attack of Lin Sun, their beast spirit mountain had suffered great losses. If not for this, there would only be more descendants entering the upper 9 realms this time. For example, the ancient freak Liang Xuan, who had died in Lin Sun's hands, and some of the absolute monarchs, all had hopes of reaching the absolute monarch realm. But now all of this was empty talk. If it wasn't for one Aohai stepping into the Extinction King realm by chance, the leaderless beast spirit mountain was destined to be annexed by other forces. When Aohai knew that not only their beast spirit mountain, but also the Golden Crow clan, the Sea Spirit clan, the Xuandu Taoism sect, the moon-worshipping cult, and other forces were also searching for Lin Sun. As long as Lin Sun appeared, he was destined to become the target of public criticism. Star Mesh Mountain was very quiet, and nothing unusual could be seen. This made Wen Aohai, who had just returned, secretly heave a sigh of relief. The distant fire realm was not peaceful, and there were bloody conflicts every day. Fortunately, this Star Mesh Mountain was located in a remote place. Otherwise, it would have long been targeted by some other major forces. A series of clanking sounds came from the mountain. This made Wen Aohai's lips involuntarily curl up in a satisfied smile. During the time he left, his fellow disciples did not forget what he had told them, and they were all working hard to dig up divine gold. This was an extremely rare divine material that could be smelted into the best Imperial Path extreme weapon, and could even be used as an auxiliary material to refine holy treasures. Without thinking too much, when Auhai walked into the mountain gate formation. But soon, he frowned and looked at the stone house at the top of the mountain. That was his place of cultivation, but now it was obvious that someone was cultivating in it. Immediately, he shook his head. There was ancestral source stone in the stone house, which was of great help to cultivation. It was not a big deal even if it was borrowed by his fellow disciples. Senior Brother One, you finally returned. Before a herb garden in the distance, Rue Monrong raised her head. When she saw Wen Auhai's figure clearly, she was instantly excited to the point tears almost flowed out from her eyes, and she flashed over towards him. Wen Auhai couldn't help but feel gratified in his heart. We've only been apart for a few days, yet junior sister Rue is already so excited. This obviously shows that I've become a queen, and I've already occupied an extremely important position in her heart. After all, Rue Monrong had never treated him like this before he'd become a king, let alone shed tears of joy. What? Senior Brother One has returned? Swish! A group of figures charged out from the tunnel in the distance. All of them had dirty faces, and they seemed extremely exhausted and in a slovenly state. But at this moment, when they saw Wen Auhai, all of them were excited to the point their eyes turned red, and some even cried out with excitement and started dancing with joy. Such a scene caused Wen Auhai to be moved, and he felt extremely moved and warm in his heart. Humans weren't plants, and they were all emotionless. How could he not sigh with emotion when he saw all his fellow disciples were actually so happy, excited, and happy upon seeing him? This is the treatment one can only enjoy after attaining the Death King realm, right? I must become even stronger, Wen Auhai thought in his heart. In the past, when he hadn't become a king, he'd never enjoyed such treatment. He took a deep breath and asked, Senior and junior brothers, thank you for your hard work. May I know how much divine wishful metal you've gathered now? The expressions of everyone instantly became unsightly, and some gnashed their teeth while some revealed expressions of sorrow and rage. Wen Auhai was stunned and said, Could it be that something special has occurred? Right at this moment, Rue Monrong couldn't help but say anxiously, Senior Brother One, all of this is a small matter. That fiend god Lin has already appeared. Before she could finish speaking, Wen Auhai had already started roaring with laughter. Good. I was just worrying about how to kill this bastard, yet I never imagined that he'd actually already appeared. His expression was filled with joy. His return this time was simply filled with good news. Not only did he receive the special treatment of all his fellow disciples, even fiend god Lin had made an appearance. As they looked at Wen Auhai, who was so overjoyed, Rue Monrong and the others weren't happy at all, and they were instead very anxious. Where is he? Quickly take me to look for him so as to prevent him from escaping. Wen Auhai had already asked. Rue Monrong pointed at the stone house at the peak of the mountain and said with a venomous expression, He's there. Wen Auhai was stunned, and he almost thought that he had heard wrongly. He said in astonishment, Junior Sister Rue, are you mistaken? This was Star Mesh Mountain, the territory of their myriad beast spirit mountain. Moreover, that stone house at the peak of the mountain was his, Wen Auhai's, place of cultivation. How could that fiend god Lin possibly appear there? That's right, fiend god Lin is there. Meng Yinghua rushed over, gnashed her teeth, and said with a face full of grief and indignation, Not only did he forcibly occupy your place of cultivation, senior brother, he even forced us to mine. All the Rui divine gold that we've mined these past few days has now fallen into that fellow's hands. What? Wen Auhai's vision darkened, and the joy in his heart vanished without a trace. He suddenly realized that all the guesses he had made earlier seemed to be wrong. During the time he was away, Star Mesh Mountain wasn't peaceful at all. Besides that, the moment this fiend god Lin arrived, he killed 8 of our fellow disciples and forcibly occupied Star Mesh Mountain. He even forced us to kneel and submit. Everyone's grief and indignation were filled with endless humiliation and hatred. As for one Auhai, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. How was this not peaceful? Even their lair had been forcibly occupied. An indescribable anger welled up in his heart, and he was so angry that his face turned green. He said, "How could this be? With the mountain guarding array, how could a small fry at the reincarnation developing realm like him do this? Don't you dare to stop him?" Rue Monrong said bitterly, "Senior Brother One, you've misunderstood. This fiend god Lin has already become the king of the pinnacle, the king of the pinnacle." As soon as these 4 words came out, Wen Auhai's head buzzed, and his vision darkened. How was this possible? He finally understood that whether it was Rue Monrong or the other fellow disciples, they weren't welcoming his return at all. Instead, they were being persecuted and were waiting for him to rescue them. Perhaps this was called thinking too highly of himself, embarrassment, shock, anger. All sorts of emotions surged into Wen Auhai's heart like a tsunami, making him want to cough up blood. It had only been a few days since he left. How could everything have changed? Wen Auhai's eyes turned red all of a sudden, and his hair stood on end. Staring at the stone house at the top of the mountain, he couldn't help but roar, "Lin Sun, come out and accept your death." His voice was like a clap of thunder, shaking heaven and earth, and causing the void to be in chaos. He was completely enraged, and his hatred was driving him crazy. "What are you shouting for? If the spiritual herbs and herbs on the mountain are destroyed, you can't afford to pay for it. And you guys, what are you waiting for? Go back and dig." In the stone house, Lin Sun's figure slowly walked out. He had his hands behind his back, and with the posture of the owner of the mountain, he berated Wen Auhai and the others. Wen Auhai had the urge to vomit blood. This guy, he was going too far. Chapter 1200. After several days of cultivation, Lin Sun seemed to have been reborn. Not only his injuries were healed, but his foundation of kingship was further consolidated. At this moment, his figure was tall and elegant as he stood on the peak of the mountain. As he looked up, he was filled with an otherworldly aura, like a cloud in the sky. This was the benefit of the ancestral source stone. The spiritual chi in the distant fire realm was extremely rich. With the help of the ancestral source stone, a few days of cultivation was equivalent to several months of cultivation in the past. "Demon Lin, you are about to die, but you still talk big. Don't you know how to write the word death?" Meng Yinghua and others were furious. Now that Wen Auhai had returned, they found their backbone. The humiliation and hatred accumulated in their hearts for many days burst out at this moment. "You let me down. Since you chose to surrender, you should have the consciousness of being slaves. But now, you go back on your words. Is it because I am too merciful?" Lin Sun sighed softly. "Merciful?" Meng Yinghua and others gnashed their teeth with hatred. These days, they were forced to mine and suffered all kinds of humiliation. How could this be merciful? "Demon Lin, do you dare to come up and fight with me?" With a swoosh, Wen Auhai rose to the sky and stood proudly on the top of the clouds. His body was surging with monstrous killing intent, and his long hair was flying in the air. Suddenly, the wind and clouds changed, and the void was in disorder. The power of the King of Extinction Realm was fully revealed at this moment. "Why not?" Lin Sun stepped on an ice dragon and lifted him up into the sky. His tall and handsome figure stood in the sea of clouds like an unshakable mountain. "Senior Brother One, you must kill this bastard." On the mountain, people shouted excitedly and looked at Lin Sun with resentment. "Don't worry, I will make him die miserably." Wen Auhai took a deep breath while his expression was icy cold, and he spoke word by word while emanating killing intent that covered the heavens and the earth. Whoosh! In an instant, his figure disappeared. As fast as the wind, he came and went without a trace. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly shrank, and he dodged subconsciously. Whoosh! A wisp of sharp wind blade flashed by, cutting off a strand of hair beside Lin Sun's ear. The void on one side was cut like a piece of silk, leaving a straight crack. What a fast speed! Lin Sun was surprised, but his fighting spirit burst out. This could be considered the first time he had fought an opponent of the same realm since he stepped into the Extinction King realm. Lin Sun was also looking forward to it. Could his opponents fight against him in this realm? Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with fierce and shapeless blades of wind. They were extraordinarily swift like bolts of lightning, and they came and went without a trace. There were thousands upon thousands of them, and they seemed like violent gales that filled the world and swept through the sea of clouds. Horrifying cracks appeared in the sky and intersected with each other. The clouds in all directions were scattered like shredded paper. From the beginning until the end, they could only faintly see Wen Aohai's figure flash like a ghost, and it was utterly impossible to capture his figure. Not only was it fast, but it was also extremely sharp. Occasionally, a wind blade would sweep out and plow out a huge ravine that was so deep that it couldn't be seen, and rocks would shatter. Being in it, Lin Sun suddenly felt like he was in a storm. The vast wilderness was full of sharp wind blades that could make ghosts and gods tremble. During this process, he kept dodging, trying to lock onto Wen Aohai's figure. However, Wen Aohai's speed was simply astonishing. His figure was fleeting and looming. In a trance, it seemed that his figure was everywhere in all directions. But when Lin Sun tried to capture them carefully, he found that they were just shadows. The way of modest wind. Wind was omnipresent and pervasive. When it was gentle, it could blow on the face unconsciously. When it was fierce, it could overturn mountains and seas, and set off a storm that could destroy the world. Undoubtedly, this was Wen Aohai's unique way of cultivation. What he sought was to be like the wind and disappear without a trace. Crack, crack, even though Lin Sun tried his best to dodge, his clothes would still be scratched and torn. In the eyes of Meng Yinghua and others, they only felt that their eyes were not enough. They could only see the sky full of wind blades and Wen Aohai's figure. Lin Sun seemed to be in a sea of wind blades. Although he moved, he was firmly besieged and unable to get out. This made them very excited, and they cheered for Wen Aohai. Awesome! It's really awesome! Senior brother Wen's way of modest wind is so unpredictable that it can make the world pale. I'm only worried that this fiend Celestial Lin will be killed too easily. In the sky, Wen Aohai was also laughing. Lin Sun, you are also the king of the top, but why is your realm so weak? Could it be that you haven't set foot in the top realm at all? Originally, he was still vigilant. After all, when Lin Sun was in the reincarnation developing realm, he already had the power to defeat his peers. He thought that after advancing to the King of Extinction realm, Lin Sun's combat power would not be too bad. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun was so weak that he couldn't even lock his figure. Crack! A wind blade brushed past Lin Sun's neck dangerously. Just a little bit more and Lin Sun's life would be in danger. But Lin Sun's expression was calm, and his black eyes were deep and indifferent. From the beginning to the end, he didn't fight back, and was occasionally scratched when dodging. He even had to admit that at least in terms of speed, Wen Aohai did have an advantage that he could be proud of. Even he was slightly inferior to him. But this didn't mean that he was suppressed. At present, the reason why he kept dodging was nothing more than to see what was unusual about Wen Aohai's combat power. This was an attitude of examination and exploration. He regarded Wen Aohai as a research object to confirm his own way of cultivation. Too weak? In that case, why haven't you defeated me until now? Lin Sun sneered, without concealing his sarcasm. Suddenly, Meng Yinghua and others were stunned. Indeed, until now, although Lin Sun was trapped and looked embarrassed, he didn't suffer any real injury at all. This seemed a little wrong. At the same time, Wen Aohai's expression stagnated, and then he sneered, "Really? Then I'll let you see what despair is." Boom! Before his voice died away, the wind blades in the sky suddenly roared. Suddenly, each wind blade turned into a storm. Thousands of storms emerged, tearing the void in all directions. It seemed that the world would be crushed and turned into nothingness. This was undoubtedly an extremely terrible blow. It was Wen Aohai's trump card. Even looking at it from a distance, Meng Yinghua and others felt an indescribable horror. It was as if their souls were about to be torn apart, and their eyes felt a stinging pain. This made them sigh in amazement as they felt increasingly excited. How was he, Fiend Celestial Lin, to withstand this strike? He was bound to be torn into powder, right? Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly brightened. He took a deep breath and no longer hesitated. He suddenly stretched out his body and punched out. As soon as this punch appeared, the world suddenly collapsed like a canvas. Thousands of turbulence were swallowed up and integrated into the fist force. Indistinctly, there was a phenomenon of heaven and earth collapsing and the reversal of yin and yang. Bang! Storm after storm was forcefully broken by the fist force. The scattered light rain and turbulence were all annihilated, not a single armor was left. This, Meng Yinghua and others who were excited suddenly stiffened and their faces changed. How could this be possible? Before, Demon Lin was still trapped like a turtle in a jar, and had no power to fight back from beginning to end. But now, as soon as he attacked, it was so terrible. Oh no! Wen Aohai's heart suddenly twitched. His figure was erratic and completely broke out, as if he had turned into a storm that swept through the ages, extremely powerful. Bang! Lin Sun's punch was finally resolved. But this didn't bring any joy to Wen Aohai. On the contrary, he looked surprised and doubtful. He noticed that something was wrong. It seemed that Lin Sun had just begun to fight with him seriously, and he had never really paid attention to his attack before. Kill! Wen Aohai roared, and the light all over his body roared. Like a hurricane flowing between the mountains and rivers of the universe, it was impossible to see his figure clearly. But Lin Sun no longer held back and began to fight back at this moment. The ice dragon rose into the air, raised its head and roared. It wrapped around Lin Sun's body, making him look like a god riding a dragon. His whole body was flowing with light, shining like the sun. Earth-shaking fist force broke out. Each punch was invincible and engulfed everything, annihilating Zhou Su's power. The heavy storm was completely submerged by the terrible fist force like a piece of paper. Bang! Caught off guard, Wen Aohai's body was swept by a fist force. At that moment, he suspected that he had been severely hit by the hand of a devil. His body was in severe pain, and blood spurted from his mouth and nose. You! He was furious and his face was livid. But before he could say anything, he had to dodge with all his strength and run his strength to the extreme. Even then, Wen Aohai still had a feeling of being powerless and being completely suppressed. Fist strikes that were capable of obliterating the world filled the surroundings, and they were fierce, overbearing, and capable of destroying everything. Bang! Bang! In just a moment, he had been hit by countless fist forces. His skin and flesh were torn, and his tendons and bones couldn't bear it. There were signs of cracking in many places, which made him cough blood frequently. Impossible! The faces of Meng Yinghua and the others completely changed. They were extremely shocked. At this moment, in their eyes, Wen Aohai was like a straw falling into a big abyss. The fist force from all directions was like a landslide and a tsunami, and he was about to be drowned. Everything seemed inconceivable. Before, Lin Sun was trapped. He couldn't fight back. How could everything change in the blink of an eye? Meng Yinghua and the others were dazed, and their hands and feet went cold. Did this mean that Lin Sun hadn't used his true strength at all? Impossible. We're both at the peak, so why is your combat strength so formidable? In the sky, Wen Aohai was already heavily injured. His hair was disheveled, his face swollen, and his entire body was branded with fist marks. But compared to this, What frightened him even more was that he actually felt an indescribable sense of powerlessness in front of Lin Sun, even though they were both at the peak. It was like Lin Sun was a towering mountain, and he was an ant shaking the mountain. He seemed very tiny and pale. When Aohai was completely unable to accept this, he'd thought that after stepping foot into the peak of the King realm, he would at least possess sufficient resources to not fear any opponent, even if he couldn't look down upon his peers. Never had he imagined that he would be completely suppressed by demon god Lin. Swoosh! Without giving Wen Aohai a chance to catch his breath, Lin Sun had already charged over. His fist was like lightning, and he swung his arm. With a bang, Wen Aohai was smashed down from the sky. Like a meteorite, he smashed a huge pit in the ground, causing the ground to tremble and dust to fill the air. You think you're worthy of being called a peak? Lin Sun looked down from the sky, his voice indifferent. Chapter 1201. Do you deserve to be called the Peerless King? The words were as plain as water, but clearly resounded in everyone's ears. Looking up, the figure high in the sky was like a floating cloud, aloof and ethereal, with an independent demeanor. On the ground, Wen Aohai's figure was twitching in the big pit as if he had epilepsy. He managed to raise his head with difficulty, his cheeks already swollen and covered with dust. His eyes were full of resentment and he hissed, "Demon God Lin, do you dare to wait for me to master the power of Tao Law and fight again?" Obviously, he was still unwilling and unable to accept the defeat. This was because these words were laughable in themselves. Defeat is defeat. If you admit it, I may look up to you. Unfortunately, you don't even have the courage to admit your failure. With such a temperament, if it wasn't for the great fortune you obtained, you are doomed to never set foot on the Peerless King realm in this life. Lin Sun's words were casual, but every word was like a knife, stabbing into Wen Aohai's heart, making his cheeks twisted and ferocious. But immediately, he said dejectedly, "I admit defeat." Lin Sun said indifferently, "It's too late." Wen Aohai's face changed dramatically, and he cried anxiously, "As long as you let me go, I can give you enough compensation." Even ants wanted to live, not to mention that Wen Aohai had just set foot on the Peerless King realm and had a bright future. How could he be willing to accept his fate? On Star Luo Mountain, Meng Yinghua and others looked pale. They were completely hit. Wen Aohai's fiasco undoubtedly broke all their hope. With pity in his eyes, Lin Sun said, "If you die, your things will naturally be my trophies. Why should I compensate you?" Wen Aohai hurriedly said, "I have a great fortune that defies the heavens. If you let me go, perhaps I can tell you this secret." Lin Sun said, "Tell me about it." In the forbidden land of Styx, there is a dry river leading to the underground. Under the river, there is a relic sealed for thousands of years. In order to save his life, Wen Aohai didn't dare to hide anything. He poured out everything like a bamboo tube. According to reliable sources, this relic is suspected to be related to the origin of Styx and contains a great fortune. After a pause, he continued, "A month later, the power of the seal will be weakened to the extreme. I have already promised Wu Lingfeng, the 9th Prince of Golden Crow Branch, to go there to seek opportunities." A strange light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. He remembered that when he just entered the distant Fire Realm, he was transmitted to the dangerous forbidden land of Styx. It was just that he didn't expect that such a headache-inducing place would actually hide such a heaven-defying fortune. Moreover, through Wen Aohai's explanation, Lin Sun learned that this operation was convened by Wu Lingfeng, the 9th Prince of the Golden Crow bloodline, and all those who participated in the operation were at the Extinction King realm. Originally, Lin Sun wasn't interested in it at all. He knew very well how terrifying the Styx forbidden area was. However, when Lin Sun learned that there were descendants of Sea Soul Clan, Xuandu Taoism sect, moon-worshipping cult and other forces participating in the action, Lin Sun was immediately tempted. He didn't forget the hatred he had with these forces in the world of burning immortals. Next, Lin Sun asked some more questions, and when Aohai answered them in detail, appearing to be very cooperative. If you let me go this time, I can come forward. I can take you with me in this action. When Aohai's face was full of hope, and his eyebrows were full of begging. At this moment Lin Sun smiled. He stared at Wen Aohai coldly and said, "Do you think I will believe you?" Without waiting for Wen Aohai to speak, Lin Sun continued, "If I'm not mistaken, you may do this to save your life, but you also want to kill me with a borrowed knife. At that time, you can secretly cooperate with Wu Lingfeng and others to deal with me. Or to put it simply, you can directly tell them my identity. Wu Lingfeng and others will definitely target me without hesitation. After all, even an idiot knows that Lin Sun is the one they want to kill most." When Aohai looked stiff and said anxiously, "I can swear to God that I have no such intention." Lin Sun smiled coldly and said, "Even if you don't have such intention now, it doesn't mean that you won't have it in the future." Bang! Before his voice died away, Lin Sun suddenly stepped on Wen Aohai's clenched left hand, which was badly mutilated and his bones were crushed into powder. Wen Aohai screamed in pain. At the same time, Lin Sun raised his hand and grabbed a sword from Wen Aohai's broken left hand. The spiritual sword, as thin as a hair, was extremely small and crystal clear. But looking carefully, this small sword was branded with at least 800 layers of dense prohibition power, which was extremely terrifying. "What is this?" Lin Sun looked at it with great interest. He could clearly feel that this sword was filled with a destructive force. When Aohai's face turned pale in an instant, and his eyes lost focus. It seemed that he didn't expect that such a hidden trump card would be discovered by Lin Sun in advance. This is a treasure I carry with me. It's not very precious. If you are interested, please accept it." He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, "Forget it. A gentleman doesn't take what others like. This sword is back to you." As he spoke, Lin Sun shook his wrist, and the sword, like a slender streamer, suddenly shot out and pierced into Wen Aohai's sea of consciousness. In an instant, Wen Aohai went crazy and roared with resentment, "Demon Lin, you will die a horrible death." The next moment, his whole body stiffened and he died. Then, his whole body corroded and turned into pitch-black venom on the ground. The nearby ground was instantly dyed black, and a pungent stench and rotten smell drifted out. Just a sniff made Lin Sun's chest and abdomen upset and sick. He couldn't help but feel awestruck. What a vicious power! A Death King realm expert had been annihilated with such ease, and it was obvious how terrifying the energy contained within this sword was. If Wen Aohai had launched a surprise attack just now, the consequences would have been really hard to predict. On Star Luo Mountain, Meng Yinghua and others were completely stunned. Their hearts were like dead ashes, and all their thoughts were burning. A few days ago, they endured and surrendered, and the only hope in their hearts was pinned on Wen Aohai. But now, the only hope was shattered with Wen Aohai's death. Demon Lin, how would he deal with them? The more they thought about it, the more frightened and helpless they felt. "What are you waiting for? Go and dig." Lin Sun's rebuke sounded in the distance. But for Meng Yinghua and others, this rebuke was more beautiful than the sound of a fairy, and they couldn't believe it. Was he going to let them go just like that? It wasn't until Lin Sun's figure disappeared from the stone house at the top of the mountain that Meng Yinghua and others finally dared to believe that all this was true. Demon Lin didn't kill them. Perhaps, since he became a peerless king, he has never taken us seriously? Meng Yinghua and others had complicated expressions. They didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. If you were provoked by an ant on the road, would you care? Now, Lin Sun's action gave Meng Yinghua and others a similar feeling. However, they could only be the ants. In the future, even if we survive, in the upper 9 realms where danger lurks everywhere and killing is everywhere, I'm afraid. Ray Monrong's voice was bitter. Afraid of what? Someone couldn't help asking. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for us to survive. Rue Monrong's voice deepened and his expression dimmed. Everyone's hearts trembled, and they realized that with one Auhai's death, they had no one to rely on. In the distant Fire Realm, if they wanted to survive, they could either choose to submit and become the vassal of other forces, or they could have another peerless king among them. But regrettably, the peerless king realm wasn't a place anyone could casually step into. Actually, submitting to demon god Lin isn't a bad idea. At least, if there's danger, he'll be the first to bear the brunt, someone said softly after hesitating for a moment. These words were extremely heart-wrenching. When Auhai had just died, and they were already thinking of completely submitting to Lin Sun. This was no different from betrayal. But at this moment, everyone was a little moved. In the upper 9 realms, annexation between the major forces happened every day. In order to survive, it was just a temporary compromise. Nothing was unacceptable. Everyone, Meng Yinghua spoke, and everyone's eyes focused on him, wanting to see what kind of bright path he would point out to them. After a long time, he finally squeezed out 4 words, "Dig well." Everyone was stunned, and the atmosphere became strangely silent. Immediately, they breathed a long sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Yes, dig well. Only in this way could they reflect their value in the eyes of demon god Lin. Without any hesitation, they immediately took action. If the big shots in the Beast Spirit Mountain outside knew all this, they would probably be so angry that they would vomit blood. Being able to enter the upper 9 realms had already proved that Meng Yinghua and the others were powerful and extraordinary, but now, they had fallen to the point where they could only rely on mining to reflect their value. How sorrowful and unfortunate was this? Lin Sun didn't care about these trivial matters. A few days ago, the passageways leading from the 3 realms to the upper 9 realms had disappeared, but until now, Old Toad hadn't shown up. According to this guy's narcissistic and arrogant nature, if he had entered the upper 9 realms, he would have caused a lot of trouble. But until now, Lin Sun hadn't heard any news related to Old Toad. Was this guy also teleported to the forbidden land of Styx and trapped in it like me? Lin Sun frowned. There was also Alu, who worried Lin Sun a little. Outside the stone house, the ice flower bud on the divine star tree would blossom and bear fruit in less than half a month. Lin Sun had decided to leave Star Luo Mountain and explore other areas of the distant Fire Realm when this divine medicine matured. One was to inquire about some information, and the other was to eliminate some old enemies, such as the Golden Crow bloodline, the Sea Soul clan, the moon-worshipping cult, and so on. My top priority now is to reach the level of Tao laws as soon as possible. Lin Sun took a deep breath, sat cross-legged on the ancestral source stone, and began to meditate. Through the duel with one Auhai, Lin Sun realized that only the power of Tao laws could fully exert the power of the King's realm. The King's realm operated the Tao laws. P.S. For those who use the Zongheng novels app to read, please pay attention to the book comments section of the Circle. On the evening of the 19th, Goldfish will have a live text broadcast with everyone, and then a large number of customized GIFs will be distributed. It could only be said that there were a lot of GIFs. For those who didn't download the Zongheng novels app, they could also download it to play. Just follow the Circle of Heavenly Suns battle. Chapter 1202. 10 days later. Lin Sun stood in front of the stone house and stared at the only flower bud hanging on the branch of the star tree. More than half of it had bloomed, flowing with divine brilliance like a river of stars, fragrant and clear Taoist patterns on the petals. Through the glow around the stamen, a little man could be vaguely seen sitting cross-legged, as if he was cultivating, and the sound of chanting could be heard. It was the first time that Lin Sun had seen a magic medicine since he started his cultivation. He increasingly felt that such a spiritual thing was extraordinary, as if it had a spirit. Tinkling sounds came from the mine in the distance. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. Since Wen Auhai's death, Meng Yinghua and others had completely admitted their defeat and intended to surrender, so they worked very hard to dig. Up to now, Lin Sun had dug out nearly 10 kilograms of divine gold. In the outside world, it was enough to make sages drool. After all, divine gold was not only a rare material for refining supreme weapons, but also an auxiliary material for refining holy treasures. Its value was amazing. Without thinking much, Lin Sun walked back to the stone house. In these 10 days, he had reached the level of the Tao of Water and was about to break through the Tao of Fire. Lin Sun had been immersed in these two kinds of Tao for a long time, and with the help of the heart-controlling Tao, it was natural for him to break through. As for the Tao of True Dragon and the Tao of Star Obliteration, he made slow progress. These two kinds of Tao were more powerful and strange than the other, and more difficult to comprehend than ordinary Tao. However, Lin Sun was not in a hurry. Comprehending the Great Way was a process of grinding, so it was useless to be anxious. In a barren forest far away from Star Mountain, a group of figures appeared quietly. Senior Brotherly, that's Star Mesh Mountain, and it can be considered to be a small paradise in the distant fire domain. Based on its aura, there's surely a primeval spirit vein hidden beneath it, and it's extremely likely that true divine herbs are born within the mountain. A young man in black said with a hint of greed in his eyes. More than 10 days ago, I have already found out that the successor of Beast's Spirit Mountain occupies this mountain, and there is only a terminating king named Wen Aohai in charge. It can be said that with the strength of our Yinhua sect, if we go all out, we can conquer this mountain. As soon as the black-clothed young man spoke, the gazes of everyone flickered, and they revealed a wisp of excitement. In the outside world, the Yin Fire Sect's foundation was not inferior to the 10,000 Beast Spirit Mountain. But the awkward thing was that he still hadn't occupied a place to stay in the distant Fire Realm. The reason was extremely simple. There were over 100 minor paradise and 4 or 5 great paradise in the distant Fire Realm, but all of them had been occupied by various great powers a long time ago. This was especially true for the powers that occupied those great paradise. Every single one of them possessed terrifying reserves, and they had numerous Extinction King realm experts holding down the fort. If these descendants of the Yin Fire sect wanted to establish themselves in the distant Fire Realm, they had to solve the problem of shelter as soon as possible. Otherwise, in the next 8 to 9 years, they were destined to fall behind the other forces. Have you investigated the news? At the side of the black-clothed young man was a thin man with a feminine appearance, fair skin, and a pair of slanted eyes. His voice was low and hoarse. Li Shangshui. He was a peak king of the Yin Fire sect. Although he wasn't an ancient freak, before he became a king, he was a famous giant. Senior Brotherly, don't worry. There won't be any mistakes. I can guarantee it with my life. The black-clothed youth swore solemnly. Since that's the case, then, let's do it. Li Shangshui took a deep breath and said, Later, I'll take the lead and deal with Wen Aohai. All of you deal with the other descendants of the myriad beast Spirit Mountain. Remember, you must go all out and end the battle quickly. Everyone agreed loudly. In the next moment, they'd already flashed out and flashed towards Star Mesh Mountain. In the distant Fire Realm, similar bloody conflicts occurred every day. For the sake of seizing the Spirit Mountain and Paradise, the different powers from the ancient Desolation Realm started an intense battle. Bang! As soon as he arrived, Li Shangshui's figure flashed, and he withdrew a battle axe that flowed with silver light. He swung his hand and fiercely smashed it towards Star Mesh Mountain. Instantly, the restrictions that covered the mountain started to tremble violently. This bright silver battle axe was actually extremely powerful, and the power it emitted far exceeded that of an ordinary king-rank treasure. Obviously, this was the King Path extreme weapon that Li Shangshui had nurtured himself. Meng Yinghua and the others were alarmed and ran out of the mine. They looked shocked and bewildered. Who had the guts to attack Star Mesh Mountain? Then, they suddenly realized that the situation had changed. when Aohai was already dead, and they, the descendants of the myriad beast spirit mountain, had long lost their leader. Now they were all relying on demon god Lin. "One Aohai, if you have the guts, come out and fight." In the distant void, Li Shangshui's voice was soft and feminine, but it resounded between heaven and earth. Rumble as he spoke, the bright silver battle axe continued to hack down, and the mountain protection formation exploded and shook. This caused Meng Yinghua and the others to be shocked and angry. They realized that this group of people had come to snatch their territory. "If you don't come out, don't blame me for destroying this formation. But at that time, this star mesh mountain will probably be stained with blood." Li Shangshui's attack was extremely fierce. Like a god, he controlled the battle axe and hacked down. His divine power made one's heart tremble. "Wen Aohai isn't here. If you have anything to say, you might as well say it." At this moment, Lin Sun walked out of the stone house on the mountain peak. His black eyes were cold as he stared at Li Shangshui in the distance. He had not expected that someone would covet Star Mesh Mountain and take the initiative to attack. It could be said that disaster had fallen from the sky. "He isn't here?" Li Shangshui frowned and then smiled coldly. "In that case, the heavens are really helping me. I'll give you a quick death. Get out of Star Mesh Mountain now and I'll spare your lives." The other descendants of the Enfire sect were also excited. This was definitely a heaven-sent opportunity. Meng Yinghua and the others looked at Lin Sun in unison. They looked pitiful as if they were seeking protection. Of course, Lin Sun could not ignore it. Star Mesh Mountain was now his territory. How could he allow others to encroach on it? What's more, the divine medicine on the mountain peak was about to mature. At this critical juncture, no matter who came, Lin Sun would not allow anything to happen to Star Mesh Mountain. Buzz. Li Shangshui seemed very unscrupulous. He held the bright silver battle axe and planned to break the formation again. "If you dare to move again, I'll chop you up." Lin Sun's black eyes became cold. These guys were really arrogant. They had come to snatch territory openly. This was completely an open robbery. "Chop me up?" Li Shangshui looked as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He looked up and laughed. The descendants of the Enfire sect were also amused. Before they came, they had all inquired about Wen Aohai on Star Mesh Mountain. Now that Wen Aohai was not here, there were still people who dared to stand up and threaten him. They were really ignorant and pitiful. However, they did not realize that Meng Yinghua and the others, who were originally panicking, were now very calm. They looked at them with pity in their eyes. These idiots did not recognize that the person who spoke to them was Demon God Lin, who was famous for his ferocity. It was simply too pitiful. The two groups of people were secretly pitying each other. It was very subtle. "Come, try chopping me up." Li Shangshui's eyes were full of ridicule, revealing a cruel and awe-inspiring expression. As an existence of the Extinction King realm, even people of the same generation did not dare to use such words to threaten him. But now, someone actually said such words. This made him feel extremely fresh. Boom! As he spoke, he threw his wrist fiercely. The silver battle-axe was like a falling comet, wrapped in the terrifying power of the King realm as it smashed towards the mountain defense formation. However, halfway through, a slender white hand appeared and firmly grasped the silver battle-axe, holding it in the palm of his hand. Li Shangshui was stunned, and his eyeballs almost popped out. This was a supreme weapon that he had painstakingly nurtured. The power it contained made even his heart tremble. But now it was easily controlled by someone else. In an instant, the awe-inspiring smile on his face froze, and his hair stood on end. This scene happened extremely quickly. When Lin Sun grasped the silver battle-axe, the Enfire sect's experts were still laughing. However, soon, like Li Shangshui, they could not laugh anymore. They looked as if they had been struck by lightning, as if they had seen a ghost. What was going on? The atmosphere suddenly became deathly silent. As for Meng Yinghua and the others, Their expressions became more and more pitiful. They were all gloating. These idiots, didn't they see who their opponent was? Was that fiend god Lin someone that anyone could mock? You're at the Extinction King realm? Li Shangshui took a deep breath, his expression gloomy. You'll know when I chop you up. Lin Sun smiled slightly, but that smile was extremely cold, without a trace of emotion. Boom! He leaped up and completely exploded. Just a moment ago, he was still a young man with an otherworldly temperament. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to have transformed into a peerless demon god that looked down on everything. He had a mighty aura. Not good. Li Shangshui's expression completely changed. It was not that his eyesight was too bad, but that in his perception, he could not distinguish Lin Sun's true aura at all, causing him to make a mistake in his judgment. In addition, his fellow sect members had solemnly guaranteed that when Aohai was the only one on Star Luo Mountain who had stepped into the Extinction King realm. This caused him to subconsciously think that Lin Sun was just an ordinary person. Who would have thought that this wrong judgment would now draw out a ruthless person who had obviously stepped into the Extinction King realm? The battle erupted in an instant. There was no way to dodge at all. Although Li Shangshui was shocked, he did not panic. He displayed the standard of a Peak King realm practitioner. He whistled through the air, the Yin fire around him surging as he activated his combat strength to the extreme. However, in just a moment, he could not bear it and was completely suppressed by Lin Sun. His body was injured in many places, and blood spurted out. And the one who injured him was the Imperial Way extreme weapon that he had personally nurtured. This caused Li Shangshui to be both shocked and furious. He did not dare believe his eyes. When did such a ruthless person appear among the Peak King realm practitioners? The descendants of the Yin Fire sect were all dumbfounded at this moment. Their bodies were trembling from shock, and their minds were in a daze. They did not expect that the attack on the mountain had just begun, and Li Shangshui would be firmly suppressed, showing signs of failure. This was too strange, it was like a dream. Chapter 1203. Puff. The silver axe flashed and blood splattered everywhere. A broken arm flew across the sky. Li Shangshui screamed in pain and retreated quickly. His face was extremely pale. He was bathed in blood and looked at Lin Sun in disbelief, as if he was staring at a monster. His hair stood on end. Who are you? Li Shangshui's heart was in turmoil. They were both at the Extinction King realm, but he was completely suppressed. This made him a little confused. Meng Yinghua and the others suddenly thought of the dead Wen Aohai. At that time, Wen Aohai also had the same expression of disbelief. Swish. Lin Sun didn't answer at all. His figure flashed and the silver axe swept up, dragging a dazzling silver light that was thousands of meters long. I admit defeat. Li Shangshui let out a strange cry and gave up without hesitation. Buzz. The strong wind was like a sharp blade, blowing his long hair backwards. The sharp blade of the axe was only 3 inches away from his forehead, glowing with Taoist light. Li Shangshui was sweating profusely and his whole body was stiff. There was no doubt that if he admitted defeat a little later, he would definitely be chopped alive by his own silver axe. On the ground, the descendants of the Yin Fire sect were all dumbfounded. Why are you afraid of death now? Lin Sun said with a faint smile. Li Shangshui swallowed hard and said bitterly, Your combat power is unparalleled. I was blind. Clang. Lin Sun turned his palm and stuffed the silver axe to him. Ignorance is not a crime. I'll spare you this time. Li Shangshui was stunned. He didn't expect Lin Sun to be so easy to talk to. It took him a long time to react. He couldn't help but show a look of shame. He bowed and said, Thank you for your magnanimity. If there is a chance, I will repay you for not killing me. His words were sonorous. Seeing this, Meng Yinghua and the others couldn't help feeling complicated. They were extremely afraid of Lin Sun, but at this moment, they felt a trace of admiration. Everyone said that demon god Lin was unscrupulous and ferocious. But if you really understood him, you would find that he was clear about gratitude and grudges. He only killed those who deserved to be killed, not a cruel butcher who killed innocent people. When Aohai was dead, but Meng Yinghua and the others were still alive. This was the best proof. Even as enemies, Meng Yinghua and the others had to admit that demon god Lin had a unique charm. No one could criticize or attack his character. The successors of the Yin Fire sect all heaved a sigh of relief. They were extremely glad that Li Shangshui had not been killed. There's no need for that. If you don't mind, you can stay on Star Luo Mountain, Lin Sun said casually. Li Shangshui's heart trembled and his expression changed greatly. What do you mean by this? Lin Sun knew that he had misunderstood. He couldn't help but sneer. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have to resort to such trick. Li Shangshui said blankly, then, I can't stay in Star Luo Mountain forever. You can choose to stay and cultivate here, said Lin Sun. Is there such a good thing? Li Shangshui and the other Yin Fire sect experts widened their eyes and almost couldn't believe their ears. Of course, I won't let you live in this blessed land for free. There are divine wool gold ores in the mountains. Pay me 5 kilograms of it every day, Lin Sun said. When Li Shangshui and the others heard this, they felt much more at ease. This was right. If Lin Sun didn't ask for anything in return, they would be suspicious. Thank you, Your Excellency. Li Shangshui bowed again to express his gratitude from the bottom of his heart. Their Yin Fire sect had yet to find a place to settle down and had long been anxious. Now that they could settle down on Star Luo Mountain in this way, they were overjoyed. By the way, may I know your name? Li Shangshui asked carefully. Lin Sun. After reporting his name, Lin Sun turned and returned to the stone house. The power of the truth of fire was on the verge of a breakthrough. If nothing went wrong, he would be able to grasp the truth of fire tomorrow. Lin Sun, he's demon god Lin. Li Shangshui was dumbfounded and gasped. The other successors of the Yin Fire sect were also stunned. After a long time, they recovered from the shock and sighed in their hearts. Losing to demon god Lin was acceptable. From this day onwards, another Yin Fire sect force appeared on Star Luo Mountain. Meng Yinghua and the others had no objections. On the contrary, with Lin Sun and Li Shangshui, 2 Extinction King realms, holding down the fort, it would undoubtedly make their situation safer. This was a good thing. Living in a blessed land on Spirit Mountain was equivalent to having a base of operations and a path of retreat. The successors of the Yin Fire sect would occasionally leave and head to other regions to search for opportunities and opportunities. Meng Yinghua and the others were also tempted. Once they became familiar with the successors of the Yin Fire sect, they would also follow them out on missions. Lin Sun did not stop them. As long as they guaranteed to hand over a certain amount of divine gold every day, he did not have the mood to care about anything else. Time passed day by day. The distant fire realm was becoming more and more turbulent. Bloody conflicts broke out frequently. Some were fighting over famed mountains and blessed lands, while others were fighting over opportunities and opportunities. Among the many orthodoxies, the weak were swallowed up, while the strong became increasingly powerful. Among them, there was no lack of battles between Extinction King realms. There were also news of Extinction King realms dying. In short, the distant fire realm was very chaotic. Cruel and bloody things happened every day. Even Star Luo Mountain was inevitably affected. Like the successors of the Yin Fire sect before, some major forces that did not have a dwelling place began to target Star Luo Mountain one after another. However, with Lin Sun in charge and Li Shangshui's protection, Star Luo Mountain had not been captured after repeated attacks. On the contrary, the successors of the major forces who attacked Star Luo Mountain suffered heavy losses one by one. If they were lucky, they would flee. If they were unlucky, they would be wiped out in one go. During this period of time, more than 5 Extinction King realms had died in Lin Sun's hands. Similarly, there were also forces like the Fire sect who chose to surrender to Star Luo Mountain, but the treatment they received was a little worse than that of the Fire sect. All this was because the Fire sect had performed very well during this period of time. It could not be said that they had made great contributions, but at least they had played a role in protecting Star Luo Mountain. In this way, they were completely tied to the same chariot as Lin Sun, and Lin Sun would not treat them badly. As for the new forces, Lin Sun also knew that they just wanted to find a backer. Even if the sky collapsed, at least Lin Sun would hold it up. In terms of loyalty, they were far inferior to the Beast Spirit Mountain and the Fire sect. But Lin Sun didn't bother to pay attention to them. They were just using each other. They regarded him as a big umbrella that could shelter them from the wind and rain, and he would take advantage of them. Every day, he would collect some magic materials and king medicines from these forces. Up to now, the forces on Star Luo Mountain had become so powerful that the successors of ordinary forces did not dare to offend them at all. Moreover, with several battles, the news that Lin Sun was in charge of Star Luo Mountain began to spread in the distant Fire Realm, causing a lot of waves. Who could have imagined that Demon Lin would set foot on the peak of the King Realm without saying a word? As early as when he was in the burning Immortal Realm, he swept through a city and massacred many great forces. Now, several Extinction King realms have been killed by him. It's so cruel that it makes people tremble. Fortunately, this demon has been staying in Star Luo Mountain and has not moved out. Otherwise, the distant Fire Realm will be even more chaotic. Similar discussions were taking place in different areas of the distant Fire Realm. It was impossible to hide it at all. Just a little inquiry was needed to know all kinds of things that Lin Sun had done after entering the distant Fire Realm. Star Luo Mountain. It was one of the famous Great Blessed Lands in the distant Fire Realm. As early as the Upper 9 Realms opened, Star Luo Mountain was occupied by the Golden Crow clan, and no force could shake it until now. 9th Prince, Demon Lin, has shown up. On this day, a news came to Star Luo Mountain and was heard by Wu Lingfeng, the 9th Prince of Golden Crow clan, who was meditating. Has he finally shown up? Golden flames surged in Wu Lingfeng's eyes, which were extremely frightening. However, when he learned what Lin Sun had done on Star Luo Mountain, Wu Lingfeng's face suddenly darkened and he fell into silence. Demon Lin had actually reached the Extinction King realm? This was something that Wu Lingfeng had never expected. Originally, according to his plan, he wanted to kill Lin Sun before he became a king. But obviously, things had changed. Especially when he heard that when Aohai was killed by Lin Sun, Wu Lingfeng's heart was filled with an unspeakable sullenness. According to the plan, in another 3 days, he would go to the Forbidden Land of Styx with Wen Aohai and other Extinction Kings to explore a great opportunity. Who would have thought that Wen Aohai was already dead? 9th Prince, the Sea Soul clan, Xuandu Daoist sect, moon-worshipping cult, and other forces have come to visit, saying that they want to discuss important matters with you. At this moment, another person came to report. I'll come right away. A divine light flashed in Jin Lingfeng's eyes, and he suddenly stood up and strode out of the cultivation ground. A magnificent palace was built on the mountainside. In the main hall, there were already 7 or 8 men and women waiting. Each of them had a powerful aura, and they emitted a heart-palpitating King's Dao aura. They were Extinction King realm experts from the various large factions. Everyone, Demon Lin has shown up. As soon as he walked into the main hall, Wu Lingfeng spoke. To his surprise, the crowd was not surprised. They only nodded and said, "We are here for this matter." In an instant, Wu Lingfeng understood that because of Demon Lin's appearance, the major forces could not sit still. His visit was probably to discuss how to deal with Fiend God Lin. As expected, in the next moment, everyone spoke at once. I wonder what kind of heaven-defying opportunity this little bastard obtained to rise to the Extinction King realm. Moreover, there are already several people of the same generation who died in his hands. Everyone knows that this kid is cruel and vicious, and he will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. If we do not take action, we will be attacked one by him. We came here to discuss how we should deal with this kid. Wu Lingfeng's eyes flickered as he listened quietly. After a long time, he took a deep breath, and his eyes flashed with determination. He said, "Fine, it won't be too late for us to head to the Forbidden Land of Sticks after we kill this demon Lin." Everyone nodded, and they all heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. Demon Lin's advancement to the Extinction King realm was enough to make anyone fearful. Now, there was reliable information that proved that several peak-level kings had died in his hands in this period of time. Who would not be wary and fearful of this? Chapter 1204. In the stone house, Lin Sun looked at the jade box in his hand with a strange look in his eyes. There was a fist-sized divine fruit in the jade box. It was flowing with illusory starlight, and its fragrance assailed Lin Sun's nose. If one looked carefully, the translucent and crystalline skin of the divine fruit had numerous mysterious markings of the Tao moving about, and they were like twisting earthworms that were profound and miraculous. It seemed to be breathing, and its luster was bright and dim, full of divinity. Star fruit. This was a real divine medicine. Lin Sun couldn't help but think of the scene a few days ago when the fruit was ripe. On the starnet divine tree that was completely bare like the roots of a horned dragon, numerous petals glowed brightly, and a divine sound that was like tidewater resounded. Then, the whole divine wood burned fiercely and turned into ashes. Only a fist-sized star fruit appeared in the void, collecting all the divine fire in the sky. It originally wanted to escape, but it had already been captured and sealed by Lin Sun, who had been waiting for it. In the past, Lin Sun had never thought that a divine medicine could have such a magical spirituality like a living thing. Lin Sun took a deep breath and put away the jade box again. No King Realm strongman would use divine medicine to cultivate, including Lin Sun. He wouldn't do such a reckless thing. It was only during the longevity tribulation that the divine medicine would be able to exert its greatest effect. What's the matter? Lin Sun pushed the door open and saw Li Shangshui waiting there. The forces that have pledged allegiance to Star Mountain are getting more and more restless. They often gather together in private. It's very likely that they're planning something. Li Shangshui hesitated for a moment and said to Lin Sun via voice transmission. Lin Sun smiled and said, "I know. In addition to the descendants of the Beast Spirit Mountain and the Enfire sect, there were 5 other major forces in Star Mountain today. The reason why these forces had pledged allegiance to Lin Sun was that they regarded him as a backer, rather than a true surrender and service. It could be said that if Lin Sun wanted them to risk their lives to deal with other forces at this time, no one would listen to his orders. If that was all, it would be fine. They were just using each other, so there was no influence. But if someone had ulterior motives and wanted to plot against him, Lin Sun couldn't tolerate it. "Brother Lin, what do you plan to do?" Li Shangshui couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun thought for a moment and suddenly said, "If you were my enemy, would you come to kill me after knowing that I'm on Star Mountain?" Li Shangshui was startled and said hesitantly, "It should be?" Lin Sun shook his head and said, "It's not that I should, but that I will. If I don't die, my enemies will never be at ease. Similarly, if my enemies don't die, I won't be satisfied either." Li Shangshui was confused. He didn't know why Lin Sun suddenly mentioned this issue. As for revenge, you definitely can't wait passively. This means that the enemy will take the initiative and gain the upper hand. As soon as Lin Sun said this, Li Shangshui agreed with him. If they took the initiative, they might be able to win by surprise, and being passive meant that one was destined to be beaten. I've been in the distant Fireland for more than a month. I believe my enemies should have found out where I am during this period of time. Lin Sun's dark eyes were cold, and he said to himself, "Do you think I should wait for them or take the initiative to go to their territory?" Li Shangshui was silent. He had already heard that Lin Sun had planned to leave Star Mountain to settle accounts with his enemies. Do you need help? Li Shangshui took a breath and asked. A smile flashed in Lin Sun's eyes. He thought to himself that he didn't misjudge Li Shangshui. It took a lot of courage for Li Shangshui to choose to support him at this time. No, the cause and effect of this hatred is too great. It's enough for me to shoulder it alone, Lin Sun said casually. More than a dozen names of ancient orthodoxies quietly emerged in his mind. Every ancient orthodoxy was a giant existence in the outside world. They were guarded by Saint Realm strongmen. If others were involved, Lin Sun would feel guilty. Tonight, your Inhua sect should leave with the descendants of the Beast's Mountain. After I leave, Star Mountain is bound to be unstable, so as not to be involved in the storm, Lin Sun said casually. Li Shangshui was shocked and then nodded. With Lin Sun in charge of Star Mountain, the other forces stationed on the mountain could only bear it and bow their heads even if they were dissatisfied. But once Lin Sun left, these forces were bound to fight for the control of Star Mountain. At that time, the first to be regarded as a thorn in their side would be the descendants of Inhua sect and Beast's Mountain. Thank you for taking care of me these days, Brother Lin. Li Shangshui cupped his hands and said solemnly. It's nothing. Lin Sun laughed it off. He could help people for a while, but he couldn't help people for a lifetime. In the final analysis, if he wanted to stand and rise in the upper 9 realms, he still had to rely on his own strength. In the evening, on the mountainside of Star Mountain, was the place where the descendants of the 5 forces who had surrendered to Lin Sun lived. Brother Ing, every day, we 5 forces have to pay 10 kilograms of wishful divine gold and a king herb to Demon Lin. But Demon Lin only needs to sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labor. This is a little unfair. Brother Ing, in my opinion, if the 5 of us join forces, we can totally replace Fiend Celestial Lin and control Star Mesh Mountain. Brother Ing, didn't you see that Demon Lin only treats Inhua sect and Beast's Mountain as his own people? As for us, we're just fat sheep being exploited by him. Brother Ing, as long as you agree, we swear that we will definitely kill Fiend Celestial Lin with you and snatch this Star Mesh Mountain. A group of people gathered together. Although they looked different, their aura was extremely strong, and there was a majestic aura surrounding them. At this time, they all looked at a black-robed young man in the center. The black-robed young man had fair skin, wide eyebrows, red lips and white teeth, so he looked like an elegant scholar as he sat there. But those who knew his identity knew that he was an ancient freak of Yinglong. His name was Ing Tianxing. He looked gentle, but his temperament was the coldest and cruelest. With Demon Lin in charge, it's enough to deter all enemies. He's a pillar that can shelter us from the wind and rain. Why should we cut him down? Ing Tianxing said slowly. Like the others, he used telepathy. This was Star Mountain, after all. They were not bold enough to plot to kill Lin Sun in a flagrant manner. Brother Ing, you're wrong. Although Demon God Lin is strong, if we were to kill him, it would similarly serve as a deterrent to the other forces. After all, if Demon God Lin died in our hands, would the other forces still dare to be enemies with us? The others spoke up one after another. Ing Tianxing could tell at a glance that these guys had already reached a tacit understanding and were just waiting for him to agree. He even knew that at this time, if he dared to stay out of it or oppose it, he would definitely be suspected and antagonized by these forces. Thinking of this, Ing Tianxing said in a low voice, if we want to get rid of Demon Lin, we must first get rid of Li Shangshui. This guy is Demon Lin's most solid supporter. In a word, he had undoubtedly expressed his attitude. A look of joy appeared on everyone's face. With Ing Tianxing joining them, they had 5 Extinction King realm experts on their side. This kind of power was enough to not fear Demon Lin. This is very simple. When Li Shangshui goes out again, we can choose an opportunity to kill him without anyone knowing. Someone said in a cold voice. All right, let's do that. After a long silence, A look of determination flashed in Tianxing's eyes as he nodded in agreement. However, on that night, news spread that Li Shangshui had led all the successors of the Yin Fire sect and the 10,000 Beasts Spirit Mountain away from Star Mesh Mountain. Furthermore, he did not intend to return. This stunned Tianxing and the others, somewhat caught off guard. Could it be that this guy had already sensed that something was wrong and had left Demon Lin behind to escape? But not long after, another piece of news spread. Demon Lin had also left, and he indicated that he might not return. This great piece of news even made Tianxing a little dumbfounded. Was this for real? Before they could even make a move, a huge problem had been solved just like that? This was too unreal, wasn't it? Sigh, now that Demon Lin has left, I actually feel a little reluctant. After all, with him around, he has helped us fend off many dangers. Someone sighed, but there was a hint of mockery in his voice. Humph, I can only say that Demon Lin is lucky. Otherwise, what awaits him would probably be death. Someone sneered. They went to the mountain peak together and entered the stone house where Lin Sun had previously lived. After careful observation, they finally confirmed that Demon Lin would not return. This was because the stone house was empty. Except for the ancestral source stone that could not be moved, there was nothing left. Furthermore, all the spiritual herbs and spiritual materials in the herb garden near the mountain peak had been taken away. This Demon Lin is really ruthless. He didn't forget to make a fortune before leaving. I remember that there were 7 or 8 king herbs in the herb garden, but they're all gone now. Someone felt the heartache and his face darkened. Don't worry about this. Now that this guy has left, Star Mesh Mountain will be ours in the future. This is a joyous occasion. We should celebrate. Some people were beaming with joy and were overjoyed. Yes, let's celebrate. That night, the heirs of the 5 great forces gathered together and drank wine to their heart's content while chatting and laughing. It was a joyous occasion. However, on this night, the relationship between the 5 major forces had become subtle. Fiend God Lin had indeed left, but which faction should control Star Mesh Mountain? Especially the stone house where the ancestral source stone was. Who should own it? If these problems were not solved, no matter which force it was, they would not feel at ease. However, before they could solve these problems, an extremely panicked voice sounded on Star Mesh Mountain in the morning 3 days later. Oh no! Oh no! We've been surrounded! The voice was like a broken gong, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere of the morning. There are actually people who are not afraid of death coming to Star Mesh Mountain to make trouble? Let's go. I'd like to see which ignorant force is courting death. Immediately, the 5 forces were alarmed. Tianxing and the other supreme kings walked out one after another. Chapter 1205. The Star Mesh Mountain was surrounded by groups of cultivators from all directions. Each group of cultivators was led by a Death King. Their killing intent surged into the sky, causing the weather to change and the world to darken. Directly opposite the mountain gate were the powerhouses of the Golden Crow bloodline, led by the 9th Golden Crow Prince, Wu Lingfeng. In the other areas were the powerhouses of the Xuandu Dao sect, the Sea Soul race, the Moon-worshipping sect, the Ancient Mystic Light race, and so on. More than 10 major forces, led by Death Kings, surrounded the lone Star Mesh Mountain so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. This kind of force was enough to make anyone despair. How could this be? On Star Mesh Mountain, the pupils of Tianxing and the others constricted as if they had been struck by lightning. Their hands and feet were cold. 3 days ago, Lin Sun, Li Shangshui, and the others had just left, which meant that Tianxing and the others had effortlessly taken control of Star Mesh Mountain. This was supposed to be a joyous event that made them feel happy. In these 3 days, they had even begun to consider themselves the masters of Star Mesh Mountain. Who would have thought that in just 3 days, Star Mesh Mountain would be surrounded? Moreover, more than 10 major forces had moved together, and there were more than 10 Death Kings. This was like an unexpected disaster that almost caused Ing Tianxing and the others to break down. Demon God Lin, are you still not planning to show yourself? Wu Lingfeng spoke in high spirit. His body was golden and slender, and he stood there casually, exuding a proud and arrogant demeanor. His voice was like thunder, reverberating in the surroundings. So he had come for Demon God Lin. Ing Tianxing and the others secretly heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Friends of the Golden Crow bloodline, Demon God Lin has already left 3 days ago. This place has changed owners." Bullsh *T. When we came, we already asked around. You guys have already become that Demon God Lin's lackeys. How dare you lie to us now? Do you really think we are idiots? On the side of the Sea Soul clan, a rugged man shouted angrily. Ing Tianxing and the others turned pale from the scolding, but in the end, they could only endure it and explain. "Friend, this is a misunderstanding. We have never sided with Demon God Lin." "Shut up." On the Xuandu Dao sect's side, a woman with a spirit sword on her back had a gloomy expression as she said, "If not for you pledging allegiance to Fiend God Lin, how could you have received his protection?" The expressions of Wu Lingfeng and the others became cold and gloomy. They were furious in their hearts. What did these people think they were? Was he a 3-year-old child that could be easily fooled? Ing Tianxing and the rest almost cried. Why didn't these guys listen to their explanations? They really didn't rely on Demon God Lin. Fellow Taoists, we have no intentions of deceiving you. To be honest, if not for that fiend Celestial Lin's quick escape, we would have long taken action to eradicate him. Ing Tianxing took a deep breath and spoke in a deep voice, his words sonorous. However, the more he explained, the darker Wu Lingfeng and the others' faces became. They felt that the other party was insulting their intelligence. To be able to come up with such a lame lie, it was simply intolerable. Cut the *king crap. Let me tell you, we didn't come here with the intention of letting any of you off. The rough-looking man from the Sea Soul clan roared with killing intent. Since Demon God Lin isn't willing to show himself, then we will flatten this mountain and destroy this place. Ing Tianxing and the others were completely dumbfounded. They were so aggrieved that they were about to cough up blood. They wanted to cry but had no tears. What the *ck was going on? Even if it wasn't a problem, it would still become a problem. Forget it, there's no point in saying more. These people are stubborn, so there's no need for us to be polite. We should end the battle quickly and flatten this place. Wu Lingfeng's eyes were like golden lightning, extremely terrifying. With a wave of his hand, the siege began. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. From all directions, peerless King Realm experts moved out, releasing a monstrous might. They were like gods, causing the void of this world to collapse. Kill! Flatten this mountain. Kill these lackeys of Demon God Lin. They dared to deceive us like we were idiots. We must kill them all. Amidst the rising and falling shouts, the group of King Realm experts attacked. In an instant, attacks that blotted out the sky and covered the earth swept towards the Star Mesh Mountain in the middle like a brilliant ocean. This scene was undoubtedly too shocking. Ing Tianxing and the others turned pale in an instant, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. How could they fight? Inexplicably, at this moment they all thought of Lin Sun. If Demon God Lin was still here, he would definitely come out to save the situation, right? Unfortunately, it was too late for regrets now. They could only fight. Everyone, we can only fight to the death. Perhaps we can kill our way out of this encirclement. Ing Tianxing was also enraged and roared. Kill. Kill as many as you can. The eyes of the others were also red. They all knew that the situation was extremely dangerous. No one dared to be negligent. They all exerted all their skills and began to fight with their lives on the line. A great battle was completely ignited. Strictly speaking, this should be a bloody battle caused by a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, even if they explained it at this time, it was destined that no one would believe them. After a full cup of tea's time, Star Mesh Mountain was covered in blood, and more than half of the mountain had collapsed. Rocks tumbled down, ancient trees were broken, and the spiritual medicines and spiritual materials growing on the mountain were severely damaged. Originally, this was like a paradise for cultivation, but in the blink of an eye, it had become a scene of desolation, and the air was filled with blood. In this battle, Tianxing and the others were killed. Not a single one survived. The other descendants of the forces they belonged to were also wiped out. Wu Lingfeng and the others had come with great momentum. They had gathered more than 10 major forces to completely eliminate Lin Sun and his Star Mesh Mountain forces. Therefore, they naturally would not allow anyone to escape. Although they had killed Tianxing and the others, Wu Lingfeng and the others had suffered nearly 30% casualties. There were also 2 peerless kings who had lost their lives in the battle, and the other peerless kings were more or less injured. After all, Tianxing and the others were also peerless kings. When they fought with their lives on the line, the lethality caused was not to be underestimated. However, in comparison, the result of this battle was already very good. The outcome was already decided. However, Wu Lingfeng and the others were not happy at all. That Lin Sun is really not here? After searching the entire Star Mesh Mountain and confirming that there was no trace of Lin Sun, Wu Lingfeng and the others' faces darkened. They were so depressed that they almost coughed up blood. Their most important goal in coming here was to kill Lin Sun. Who would have thought that after paying such a huge price, they would only be able to kill a bunch of lackeys? The main culprit had long since escaped. Could it be that they didn't lie to us just now? Someone murmured, his face extremely pale. There was a moment of silence. Wu Lingfeng and the others also realized that they might have made a big mistake in this battle, causing them to lose some faith. This damned demon god Lin is too cunning. Someone gritted his teeth in hatred, fuming with anger. What should we do now? Someone could not help but ask. The others also looked at Wu Lingfeng. They had come with such a large force, but they had made such a mistake. They had paid a bloody price, and even lost the lives of 2 peerless kings. In the end, they had not even found the shadow of the main culprit. This was too embarrassing. Wait a little longer. This demon god Lin might have just gone out. When he hears that Star Mesh Mountain is in trouble, he will definitely return. Wu Lingfeng took a deep breath, restrained the impulse of coughing up blood, and said in a low voice, "In addition, send people to the nearby area to investigate the news. This time, we must not return without any achievement." Everyone nodded. This was the only way. If they returned without any achievement and were known by others, they would definitely become a laughing stock. But where on earth did demon god Lin go? They were eager to know. At this time, Lin Sun was standing in front of a towering mountain shaped like a tiger. Above this mountain, there was auspicious light rising and divine light falling. From a distance, it looked like a waterfall of stars flying up. The mountain was like a tiger, constantly swallowing the rolling spiritual energy between heaven and earth. A layer of obscure prohibition power covered it, blocking the investigation of the outside world, making it impossible to see the specific scene in the mountain. But even then, such an extraordinary scene could already be said to be shocking. Good place. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with a touch of light. 3 days ago, after leaving Star Mesh Mountain, he said goodbye to the descendants of Enfire Sect and Beasts Mountain and set off alone. Then he wandered in the distant Fire territory, trekking over mountains and rivers, and after many inquiries, he finally determined the place where the enemy forces were entrenched. The spiritual mountain in front of him was called Flying Star, the territory of Golden Crow. It didn't take long for Lin Sun to withdraw his gaze. The prohibition power of Flying Star Mountain had been cracked by him and could no longer stop him. Stop. This is the territory of Golden Crow. What are you doing here? In front of the mountain gate, there were several strong guards. When they saw Lin Sun coming alone, they immediately questioned him. You don't know me? Lin Sun asked. Everyone was stunned, and then their eyes suddenly widened as if they had seen a ghost. It seemed that they couldn't believe that the guy who was hated by their Golden Crow bloodline would suddenly appear here. Aren't you in Star Mesh Mountain? One person asked in a silly way. The others were also confused. After all, this time their ninth prince, Wu Lingfeng, had gathered more than a dozen major forces to go to Star Mesh Mountain in order to kill demon god Lin in one fell swoop. But now, Fiend Celestial Lin had appeared in their territory. What do you want to do? Someone gasped and asked in a trembling voice. Revenge, of course. Lin Sun smiled slightly. Puff. As soon as his voice fell, he waved his sleeve, and these strong men in front of the mountain gate had no time to escape. They were obliterated on the spot by a blazing light. Then, with his hands behind his back, he stepped into the mountain gate steadily and calmly. Buzz. The royal prohibition formation covering the mountain suddenly rippled. However, Lin Sun walked leisurely and was never stopped by the terrible prohibition power from beginning to end. How dare you? Who are you? How dare you break into Flying Star Mountain? On the way, someone was alarmed and shouted. Chapter 1206. At the peak of Flying Star Mountain. The palaces were arranged row upon row, and all of them were newly constructed. Every single palace was occupied by a great power, and they were clearly differentiated from one another. Flying Star Mountain was one of the few blessed lands in the distant Fire Realm. Since the opening of the Upper Nine Realms, this place had always been occupied by the Golden Crow clan. Up until now, not only was no one able to shake it, many powers had chosen to submit to the Golden Crow clan and become its vassals. In this way, the combined forces of the entire Flying Star Mountain had stepped into the ranks of overlords in the distant Fire Realm, and there were no more than 5 that could go against them. Unfortunately, when the ninth prince left, he was worried that other powers would take advantage of the situation and invade, so he left us on the mountain to defend. Otherwise, we could have gone to meet that demon god Lin. A man in a fiery robe sighed. It can't be helped. There are many powers in the distant Fire Realm. If we all leave Flying Star Mountain, the other powers will definitely be unable to sit still. At the side, a white-haired woman spoke slowly. Everyone, since we're staying on the mountain, we'll obey the ninth prince's orders and protect the divine herbs on the mountain. A man with a curly beard spoke in a low voice. When the divine herbs were mentioned, everyone looked towards the same direction at the same time. It was a waterfall that cascaded down from the cliff. What flowed out of the waterfall was shockingly the purest spiritual liquid. There was a pool beneath the waterfall, and there were 3 divine lotuses growing within it. Every single divine lotus had branches that were as black as ink, and their flowers that were as white as jade. One black and one white, it was like the intersection of yin and yang, perfectly fusing into one, and it flowed with a pure and beautiful rain of light. The waterfall that was completely formed from spiritual liquid descended like a white dragon, and before it even fell into the pool, it was swallowed by the 3 divine lotuses. Yin-yang divine lotus. It was a peerless divine herb that was extinct in the outside world. It was even to the extent that amongst all the divine herbs in the world, the yin-yang divine lotus could be considered a high-grade one, and it was extremely rare. If one consumed it, not only would it be immeasurably beneficial to the cultivation of a king realm expert, it would also allow one to directly control the 2 grand daos of yin and yang without comprehending them. The grand daos of yin and yang were viewed as the daos of yin-yang. They displayed the purity of the world, the order of the world, and they were extremely profound and powerful. Yin didn't grow and yang didn't grow. If he could control these 2 daos, he would be able to merge them into a true heaven-connecting Tao, Tai Chi. As for the Grand Tao of Taiji, it was a Tao that pointed directly to the essence of the world. It possessed endless and boundless profundities. Thus, it was obvious how great the value of the 3 yin-yang divine lotuses within the pool beneath the waterfall was. Before the 9th Golden Crow Prince, Wu Lingfeng, left behind an elite force to guard the Flying Star Mountain. At the end of the day, it was to ensure the safety of the 3 divine herbs. The young man in a fiery robe, the white-haired woman, the curly-bearded man, and a few others were all existences that had stepped into the Extinction King realm, and they were from different powers. With such a force holding down the fort, no matter which great power came to attack Meteor Mountain, they would probably suffer heavy losses. The 9th Crown Prince once said that when he returns, he will pluck these 3 divine lotuses and bring out 2 of them as a reward for us to fight for. The fiery-robed man's eyes were burning. He took a deep breath and said, "Let's not talk about how we're going to fight for it. We can't let the 9th Prince down." The white-haired woman laughed with ridicule and scoffed with disdain. "With us holding down the fort here, which power would dare to attack us? The only power we have to fear is the number 1 sect in the West Heaven dimension, the Profound Sikh Sword School, the Heavenless Sect, the Ultimate Tao Sect, and a few other great powers. The Profound Sikh Sword School and Heavenless Sect each occupy a large paradise, so it's absolutely impossible for them to go against us unless they're confident in their victory. So we don't have to worry about this." The curly-bearded man spoke casually. Presently, only the Golden Crow clan, the Profound Sikh Sword School, the Heavenless Sect, the Ultimate Tao Sect, and a few other great powers could be considered as overlords in the distant fire domain. Just as the curly-bearded man had said, if they weren't confident in their victory, then it was absolutely impossible for conflict to arise between overlords. This was like a sandpiper and a clam fighting, and it was very likely for both sides to be heavily injured while the other great powers would take advantage of the situation to reap the benefits. "Shit! Someone's attacking!" A sharp howl resounded as a black-clothed man ran over in panic. The fiery-robed man and the others were stunned. "There's really someone who isn't afraid of death and dares to attack us at this moment? Which great power is it?" The white-haired woman stood up while emanating a murderous aura, and her icy cold voice resounded throughout the peak of Meteor Mountain. "It's not those great powers, it's a person." The black-clothed man spoke with a trembling voice. Everyone was stunned once more, and they almost thought they heard wrongly. Is he mad to dare come to Meteor Mountain all by himself? Or perhaps he's purely tired of living, and has come to court death. "Come, let's go have a look." The fiery-robed man was the first to make a move. "Interesting. I would like to see exactly who it is that dares to challenge him alone." The others stood up successively with cold and indifferent expressions, and killing intent was faintly visible in their eyes. Bang! Lin soon ascended the mountain at a leisurely pace. Many experts noticed him along the way, and they tried to stop him, but it was all in vain. He didn't waste any strength at all. His movements were swift and fierce, and he struck out like a bolt of lightning as he slaughtered his way forward, leaving behind corpses and pools of blood all along the way. On the other hand, his entire body was clear and spotless as he continued forward. Shrill cries, sharp cries, and shouts resounded without end, causing the originally tranquil Meteor Mountain to become chaotic. Rumble! The ice dragon soared into the sky like a snow-white dragon. Every single time it moved, it would crush its opponents that charged out from its path, causing the latter's body to explode into pieces while a rain of blood sprayed down. "You're courting death. Quickly control the formation to annihilate him." A group of King Realm experts appeared with livid expressions, and they were extremely furious. They couldn't tolerate Lin Sun running amok. The Royal Tao restriction formation that covered the mountain glowed, and it flowed with obscure and terrifying fluctuations of destruction. Moreover, the scene of a golden crow soaring through the sky and incinerating the heavens and the earth faintly appeared. This was undoubtedly an extremely terrifying Royal Tao restriction formation. As soon as it was activated, boundless lightning and flames charged out and transformed into golden crows that flapped their wings and emanated divine flames that rained down towards Lin Sun. If it was an Extinction King Realm expert, Then it would be extremely difficult for that expert to endure if he was trapped within it, and he was bound to suffer calamity. But all of this was bound to be in vain for Lin Sun. As a spirit tattoo grandmaster, he'd seen through the profundities of this formation before he'd ascended the mountain, so how could he possibly be trapped within it? Bang! In an instant, he waved his sleeve, and the Taowu seal appeared in the air and smashed towards the core of the formation. At the same time, his figure flickered, and he used the 9 strikes for shaking heaven. His fist force burst out, and all the divine flames that pounced on him were smashed into pieces. The golden crows derived from the formation didn't have time to react before Lin Sun rushed forward. He killed them on the spot with one punch, and the rain of light exploded. Bang! As the Taowu seal fell, the foundation of the formation was severely shaken, causing the whole formation to wail and shake violently. The group of King Realm experts who operated this formation were all shocked. What a powerful combat force! How could he break the formation after being trapped in it? It's him, Demon Lin. Finally, someone recognized Lin Sun and cried out involuntarily. How could it be possible? Didn't the 9th prince go to kill him? Why did he appear here? The others' faces changed in disbelief. Bang! With a loud bang, Lin Sun rushed out of a flaw in the formation like a demon. His whole body was flowing with Taoist light, and his power was terrifying. Oh no! The King Realm experts were all shocked. This forbidden formation was derived from the secret formation of the Golden Crows, and it was extremely powerful. But who would have thought that it would be broken by Demon Lin in just a few breaths? Lin Sun had already rushed over and attacked quickly. The mighty fist force was like a surging ocean, revealing the real power of the law. The King Realm experts tried to dodge, but it was impossible. Soon, there were more broken corpses on the ground, their bodies and souls destroyed. Although they were King Realm experts, they were really no different from chickens and dogs to Lin Sun. He didn't need to spend too much effort to kill them. The whole Flying Star Mountain was shaken, and a tragic atmosphere filled the air. Lin Sun didn't feel the slightest burden about this. When he climbed the mountain, he knew that Wu Lingfeng led a group of King Realm experts to attack Star Luo Mountain today in order to kill him. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a little lucky. He was not afraid, but glad that he had arranged for the successors of Enfire Sect and Beast Spirit Mountain to leave Star Luo Mountain a few days in advance. Otherwise, he was bound to encounter a great disaster this time. Lin Sun didn't need to think at all to know that even if he returned to Star Luo Mountain now, it would probably be beyond recognition. Of course, the most tragic was undoubtedly the 5 forces who stayed on Star Luo Mountain. Since they couldn't find him, Wu Lingfeng would definitely vent his anger on them. Lin Sun didn't feel guilty at all. These 5 forces had ulterior motives. Even if they didn't suffer a disaster, they would be wiped out by him in the future. Since you have come to my territory, I will destroy your dwellings one by one. This was what Lin Sun was thinking at the moment. Kill! Someone shouted, and a scarlet flying shuttle swept over. It was dazzling and showed its power far beyond that of an ordinary King Realm expert. Obviously, a top figure had made a move. Lin Sun didn't dodge. His fist force swept out, and with a loud bang, the flying shuttle collapsed and made a shrill wail. At the same time, the young man in the red robe, the white-haired woman, and the other King Realm experts appeared. Demon Lin, it's really you? They were shocked and in disbelief. They couldn't imagine that the target Wu Lingfeng wanted to kill with all his might was not on Star Luo Mountain, but had taken the initiative to come to their territory. This was too surprising. Why can't it be me? Lin Sun asked. As he spoke, he strode forward. His lonely figure flowed with thousands of rays of light, like a dormant dragon coming out of the abyss. He looked down on the top figures as if they were nothing. Since you are here, don't even think about leaving alive. The white-haired woman took a deep breath and said coldly. She threw her hand and a silver-white sword swept out. With a buzz, it shook the void and slashed at Lin Sun. The others also realized that the situation was a little strange, but they didn't have time to think too much and attacked one after another. Their top priority now was to kill this demon Lin, who had suddenly appeared. Otherwise, Star Luo Mountain would be in danger. P.S. This Saturday night at 7 o'clock, Goldfish will appear in the Battle of Talents circle. She will chat with everyone and give a batch of gifts, including Kindle e-readers, Panda cups, USB flash drives, and so on. The event post had been pinned to the top of the circle. Chapter 1207. The 7 Extinction King Realm experts came from different forces and pledged allegiance to the Golden Crow clan. Now, after confirming Lin's identity, the white-haired woman took the initiative to attack Lin, who was rushing towards her. The others followed suit. They had heard many things about Lin Sun long ago. They knew that during the period when he entered the distant Fire Realm, he had killed several peerless kings. His combat strength was extremely strong. Therefore, they didn't hold back at all. Boom! Suddenly, the divine light surged like a tide and the power of kingship roared. This scene frightened some strong people in the distance. They stayed far away and didn't dare to get close. Extinction King Realm. Every single one of them possessed formidable combat strengths that were sufficient to crush an ordinary King Realm expert, and they'd never appeared in the past. As for this legendary realm, there were too many analyses and speculations. But so far, no one could really determine how powerful the Extinction King realm could be. That was because this realm had never existed since the beginning of time. It had never truly appeared after the arrival of this great era. Even sages couldn't understand it. But there was no doubt that those who could pass the Extinction King tribulation and become Extinction Kings were the top talents among their peers. At this moment, 7 Extinction Kings attacked together. The power of the Extinction King realm gathered together and erupted. It could be imagined how terrifying it was. And under such an attack, would Fiend Celestial Lin be able to withstand it? Everyone in the distance was watching closely. Whoosh! In a split second, the sword had broken through the air and chopped towards Lin Sun's head. Lin Sun's eyes were like lightning. He kept charging forward and didn't dodge at all. Only a strange tribulation appeared in front of him. The tribulation shook and turned into a Swanee. Different from before, the Swanee was like a real living creature, exuding a terrible kingship aura. Its giant claws covered with dragon scales held an ancient seal. It smashed down. In a trance, everyone had a feeling that an ancient Swanee broke through time and space. It grasped the seal and wanted to suppress all evil in the world. With a clang, the divine sword was hit by the seal and fell to the ground like a dead snake. The white-haired woman felt suffocated. She suffered a backlash and almost coughed up blood. Her expression changed abruptly as she let out a sharp howl. She had completely realized that demonic god Lin was indeed, as the rumors said. He was extremely powerful and had to be treated as a great enemy. Rumble. At the same time, Lin Sun had already charged into the attacks of the group of kings. He was arrogant, domineering, and extremely powerful. It didn't look like they were being besieged. It was more like one person was attacking a group of kings. The light around him rumbled and spread out like a tsunami, forming the word tribulation that rushed in all directions. Some of the tribulations turned into ice dragons with pearls in their mouth. Icy flames swirled around them as they poured down, freezing the void and filling it with extreme cold power. Some turned into burdens, carrying natural battle armor on their backs as they charged forward. Some transformed into Pu Lao that carried a zither, and the sound of the zither reverberated like the sound of a powerful army. On the other hand, Yazi let out a long howl, and the sound waves fused with the sound of the zither, transforming into a terrifying torrent of divine power that surged in all directions. Apart from this, he would taunt with his bow in hand, and his arrow would shoot through the universe. Bayan held the precious cauldron. Billowing smoke and dust rushed out of the cauldron, seemingly capable of drowning out the sun, moon, and stars. Chunyo stepped into the starry sky with a divine saber hanging from his tail. Baxia charged into the sky, casting out a large net that blotted out the heavens and earth. Yazi roared, becoming several thousand zhang tall, and his roar was like thunder after Lin soon grasped the power of the King Dao laws. The 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon underwent a brand new transformation. Every divine beast seemed to have come to life, and they wielded their own divine weapons. Rumble! This place suddenly became turbulent, and if it wasn't for the power of restrictions covering it, the entire Flying Star Mountain would have suffered a destructive blow. In such an intense battle, with a bang, the fiery-robed youth who bore the brunt of the attack was the first to be defeated. Damn it! The power of the King Dao laws! The fiery-robed man roared angrily, his face full of shock and disbelief. Dark red blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he was injured in this first confrontation. On the other side, a tall and thin man in a gray robe let out a miserable cry. After his arm was frozen by the pearl in the mouth of the ice dragon, he was slashed by the divine blade hanging from Chionyo's tail. Pooh! An arm was directly chopped off, and even the blood was frozen, not spilling out. Impossible! How can he be so powerful? We're both at the apex, so why is his strength formidable to such an extent? Even though the other King Realm experts had dealt with the various attacks, they couldn't help but be shocked when they witnessed the miserable states the young man and gray-robed man were in. The first confrontation allowed them to personally sense Lin Sun's strength for the first time. Fighting Lin Sun was like going against a divine mountain, and it actually gave them a feeling of powerlessness that was impossible to shake. This caused them to feel disbelief. After all of them stood at the apex, and there was no lack of existences that had grasped the energy of Dao laws. Now, not only were the 7 of them unable to do anything to Lin Sun, 2 of them had even been injured by Lin Sun, and this was too shocking. Everyone, this bastard was already invincible when he was at the reincarnation evolution realm. Now that he's stepped foot into the ultimate king realm, do all of you dare imagine the consequences if we still don't go all out? The white-haired woman's expression was unsightly as she gritted her teeth. There was utterly no need for her to remind them because the others had already realized that the situation was bad, and they'd completely taken Lin Sun to be their #1 enemy. Bang! The battle grew even more terrifying. It caused the heavens and the earth to dim down while terrifying chaotic flows of energy surged towards the surroundings. Every single strike carried the might of destruction capable of incinerating mountains and boiling oceans. They truly didn't dare imagine what this place would look like if the energy of the restrictions didn't cover it. The experts that resided in the other areas of Flying Star Mountain couldn't help but shudder when they saw this, and they felt extreme terror. Some experts that had already stepped foot into the King Realm, yet had no fate with the apex, couldn't help but be astounded and at a loss for what to do at this moment. They were all in the King Realm, but because of the word apex, the gap between them was like the gap between the heavens and the earth. Kill! The white-haired woman and the others had already gone all out. In the outside world, the impact of such a force was sufficient to destroy a city or obliterate an expanse of mountains and rivers. However, they were still unable to do anything to Lin Sun. At this moment, the glow of the Tao flowed around his body. Even though he was all alone, his imposing aura was like a dragon that had emerged from a deep pool, and he moved through the surroundings while deducing his own Tao. Every single punch carried the will to obliterate the world. On the other hand, the divine beasts formed from the 9 transformations of the Calamity Dragon resided around him, and they moved about while executing various divine abilities to destroy all attacks. Looking from a distance, he was like a god descending to the world, with unparalleled and invincible momentum. This was Lin Sun's Tao. With his own body, without relying on external objects or opportunities, he proved the peerless king's tribulation and embarked on an unprecedented extreme road. Now, during the period of secluded cultivation in Star Mountain, Lin Sun not only consolidated his cultivation, but also reached the realm of Tao laws of water and fire. When he killed Wen Aohai, Lin Sun didn't even master the power of Tao laws, but he defeated Wen Aohai easily. At this time, he had mastered the power of Tao laws, and his combat strength had already undergone a qualitative transformation. It was no longer the same as when he killed Wen Aohai. Now, although there were as many as 7 peerless king realm experts, for Lin Sun, although there was some pressure, that was all. He didn't even use the broken sword, boom. After a while, Lin Sun rushed violently, and his fist force burst out in all directions, vast and boundless. Several people coughed up blood, and their bodies were swept by the fist force, and they staggered back. Crack! After being hit many times, the sword of the white-haired woman finally couldn't bear the burden and broke, bursting into a rain of light. There was a scream of horror and panic in the distance. They couldn't believe that demon god Lin, who was besieged by a group of peerless king realm experts, could be so terrifying. With a bang, Lin Sun swooped down, and the Tao light rolled, directly imprisoned the curly-bearded man, and then stomped him to the ground. "You!" the curly-bearded man screamed, but before he could react, Lin Sun's toes exerted force, and his body directly cracked, and he was stomped into meat paste. He died extremely miserably. A peerless king realm expert died suddenly. Everyone's hair stood on end, and their scalps were numb with fear. The power of crushing a peerless king realm expert with 1 foot was simply unimaginable. Kill! The fiery-robed man and the others were completely stimulated. Their eyes were red, and they all began to fight desperately. "How dare you call yourself the peerless king realm expert with such power?" Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with disdain, and he didn't hold back anymore. He had already tested the strength of these opponents. To be honest, it surprised him, and he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. If such people dared to call themselves the peerless king realm expert, it would be a slander to the word, peerless king realm. A man screamed in horror. Lin Sun unexpectedly grabbed his neck, lifted him up, and then split him into 2 halves. Blood splashed high into the air. Then, the man's body turned into its original form, which was a fat 5-colored partridge. Lin Sun thought of a popular saying on the dining table in the secular world: "No bird is better than a partridge, and 1 partridge is better than 9 chickens." It was an extremely rare delicacy. Whoosh! With a wave of his sleeve, he put away the 5-colored partridge without leaving a trace. Is this guy going to eat the partridge's peerless king realm expert? Many people in the distance were dumbfounded, and they were scared out of their wit. They all remembered that demon god Lin was not only bold, but also had a big appetite. He had eaten black nightmare dog meat, golden crow meat. Now, he actually wanted to eat the 5-colored partridge. Not long after, the white-haired woman was killed, and her neck was twisted, causing panic again. This was the 3rd peerless king realm expert who died in Lin Sun's hands. To Lin Sun's surprise, the white-haired woman was a white-feathered golden-eyed crane. It was extremely beautiful, but in Lin Sun's eyes, it was another ingredient that he had never tasted before. He waved his hand and put it away. Then, he looked at the remaining 4 extinction king realms and thought to himself, "I wonder which clan these guys are from." These people had long been frightened by Lin Sun's bloody means. At this moment, when they were stared at by Lin Sun's strange eyes, their hair stood on end, and they all had the impulse to flee. In fact, at this point in the battle, they already had the intention to retreat. When Lin Sun attacked again, the man in the red robe did not say a word, but directly turned around and fled towards the top of the mountain. As the saying goes, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Seeing this, how could the other 3 be stupid enough to fight desperately? They all chose to flee. Chapter 1208. 3 of the 7 supreme kings were killed one after another in the fierce battle. The remaining 4 fled without fighting. On the Flying Star Mountain, the experts of the major forces in the other areas panicked when they saw this. They screamed and fled. Even the Supreme Kings were no match for Lin Sun. Who dared to stay? At this moment, in everyone's eyes, Lin Sun was invincible. His invincible spirit was enough to make anyone feel cold. Die! Lin Sun's voice was cold. His figure disappeared into thin air. The next moment, he appeared behind a Supreme King who was fleeing. His fist force burst out and destroyed everything. The Supreme King was a handsome and extraordinary young man. He was extremely conceited before, but now he was desperate. Like a cornered beast, he tried his best to resist. But in a flash, he was killed by Lin Sun. Lin Sun's fist force made his whole body burst into pieces. Run! The Flying Star Mountain became more and more chaotic. People were crying and screaming everywhere. Before, their biggest reliance was the 7 Supreme Kings who were guarding here. But as these Supreme Kings were killed one after another, the strong people on the mountain all collapsed. They couldn't fight at all. Although Lin Sun was alone, he had the power to defeat everyone. Who could be his opponent? They even suspected that even if Wu Lingfeng, the 9th prince, came back, it would be difficult to suppress Lin Sun's arrogance. Die! Lin Sun's cold voice sounded again. He stretched his palms and fingers, and a burning galaxy spread out in the void. Stars burst and burned in it. It contained the real power of the law of fire, and its power was completely different from before. Boom! In the distance, a Supreme King who had already rushed to the sky and fled in panic was drowned by a fiery galaxy before he could completely leave the range of the Flying Star Mountain. The thousands of stars in the galaxy burned and exploded, causing him to suffer unbearable damage in an instant. He died in a shrill and unwilling scream. His flesh and bones were all burned, and his body and soul were destroyed. Originally, Lin Sun wanted to chase the Supreme King who was fleeing in another direction. But when he noticed the trace of the man in the red robe, he immediately changed his mind. Whoosh! The next moment, he disappeared. The fiery-robed man was the first to choose to flee. However, he didn't flee towards the outside of the mountain. Instead, he fled towards the summit of the mountain. At this time, he had already arrived in front of a spirit spring waterfall on the side of the mountain peak. Beneath the waterfall was a pool, and 3 yin-yang divine lotuses swayed within it while flowing with yin and yang energy, causing it to seem divine and illusory. As soon as he arrived here, the fiery-robed man flicked his sleeve, causing an expanse of divine light to sweep out and envelop the yin-yang divine lotus within the pool. However, at practically the exact same moment, a layer of terrifying restrictive formation energy suddenly appeared in the surroundings of the pool, and it spread out. Rumble! The divine light exploded, but the power of the restriction did not diminish. If the fiery-robed man had not dodged in time, he would have been hit. That damned Wu Lingfeng, he even set up a forbidden array here. The fiery-robed man's face darkened. He was flustered and exasperated. He realized that even though Wu Lingfeng had left, he had never trusted the forces that had pledged allegiance to him. Yin and Yang Divine Lotus? Lin Sun appeared. His black eyes flashed, and his heart couldn't help but tremble. This was a divine medicine that had long been extinct in the outside world. It was almost like a legend, but at this time, there were 3 yin-yang divine lotuses growing in the pool. It was no wonder that the Meteor Mountain was regarded as a great blessed land. It was really a heavenly place. Whoosh! The fiery-robed man fled without hesitation. Originally, he couldn't accept the fact that he was utterly defeated by Lin Sun. But now, he even failed to seize the yin-yang divine lotus and lost the perfect opportunity to escape, which made him so angry that he almost coughed up blood. Sure enough, as he expected, Lin Sun took advantage of this moment to kill him. There was no doubt that the fiery-robed man was killed. Before he died, He stared unwillingly at the 3 yin-yang divine lotuses in the pool, and the greatest hatred in his heart fell on Wu Lingfeng, because, in the fiery-robed man's view, if it wasn't for this guy secretly setting up a restriction that prevented him from seizing the yin-yang divine lotus, he would have had a chance to escape. Unfortunately, it was useless to regret. With the death of the fiery-robed man, only one of the 7 peerless kings finally escaped. Lin Sun didn't bother to chase after him, so he fixed his eyes on the yin-yang divine lotus in the pool. After a while, the restriction around the pool was successfully broken by Lin Sun, and the 3 yin-yang divine lotuses fell into Lin Sun's hands. With this divine medicine, it's sufficient for me to grasp another heavenly grand Tao. Lin Sun's black eyes were bright. The world's great ways were divided into 9 grades, but above the 9 grades, there were 99 supreme great ways. In the yin-yang divine lotus, there were 2 first-class great ways, yin and yang. If the 2 great ways were combined, it could be transformed into a supreme great way, Tai Chi. This great way, as early as ancient times, was regarded as a great way that reached the origin of heaven and earth. It had incredible magical effect. Next, Lin Sun didn't delay. He began to take action and began to sweep the Flying Star Mountain. As one of the few great blessed places in the distant Fire Realm, the fortunes and opportunities bred in the Flying Star Mountain were completely beyond Lin Sun's imagination. In the pine forest by the cliff, there was a golden pagoda pine, on which a golden pagoda was condensed, and the fragrance was drifting. It was also a kind of magic medicine. On the bank of the mountain stream, there was a herb garden, which was full of lights and colors, and the fragrance of medicine was rising, transforming into a rich and colorful spiritual mist. There were more than 10 king herbs alone. In addition, there were also ores containing rare spiritual materials, gurgling spiritual springs. All these were swept away by Lin Sun. The overmatches of the major forces on the mountain fled in panic like stray dogs. Some people wanted to fish in troubled waters and get some benefits before leaving. But because of their greed, they lost the chance to escape and were killed by Lin Sun. Later, Lin Sun came to the top of the mountain. There were palaces standing here, which originally belonged to different forces. When Lin Sun arrived, these palaces had long been empty. Although there were many scattered treasures left, most of them could hardly catch Lin Sun's eyes. Even so, Lin Sun still obtained a lot of spiritual materials for refining treasures, as well as various elixirs and treasures that had already been refined. Although most of them were useless to Lin Sun, their value was still amazing. When Lin Sun was about to leave the empty palace where the branch of Golden Crow was located, he suddenly noticed an ancient painting hanging on the wall. The painting was 4 feet long and 1 foot wide. It was old and yellowed, mottled with antiquity. In the painting, a thin figure was sitting on the starry sky in a leisurely manner, with a sense of great freedom and freedom. In his hand there was a fishing rod. Below him was a mighty galaxy with twinkling stars, fishing above the starry sky. The painting was very ordinary, even a little dim and dilapidated, but the atmosphere in the painting could be described as shocking and shocking. Throughout the ages, who could sit in the starry sky and fish in front of a galaxy? What kind of realm did one have to reach to possess such a carefree, transcendent, and carefree bearing? Lin Sun's eyes were attracted at once, and his mind was touched. However, when he looked carefully, he found that only the outline of the thin figure's face was exposed, and it was extremely blurred. Similarly, in his hand, there was a fishing rod but no fishing line. Was the meaning of this picture that willing people would take the bait? Lin Sun felt a jolt in his heart and probed it with his spiritual awareness. However, he didn't gain anything. It was as if this was just a simple ancient map. Lin Sun frowned and thought that the painting was hung here like a miscellaneous item, indicating that the branch of Golden Crow had not understood any secret from the painting. But why did he feel something was wrong? Lin Sun looked at the thin figure sitting cross-legged in the starry sky and stared at him carefully. In a trance, he had a familiar feeling in his heart. It was him. Suddenly, an idea flashed in Lin Sun's mind. He turned over his palm and there was a copper piece in it. The copper piece was mottled with rust, and there was a painting engraved on it. An old man in a Taoist robe was riding on the back of a green ox, looking up at the sky in a leisurely manner. The painting was old and simple. After years of erosion, it was a little dim and blurred, but it was filled with a kind of supreme pressure. The pressure was vast and boundless, and it seemed as if the old man in a Taoist robe could come back to life at any time. Just his gaze alone made one's heart tremble. It was deep and vast, reflecting the ups and downs of the sun and moon, the changes of time, and the mysteries of the great way of the world seemed to be contained in the depths of his eyes. This was the Taoist riding an ox. At that time, Lin Sun was chased by the Black Demon Tengu clan in the West Hung territory, and he had to flee deep in the mountains. During this process, he had only released a blood leopard out of kindness. Who would have thought that the blood leopard would repay his kindness and give him this copper block with the Taoist riding a bull engraved on it? Lin Sun still remembered that after his investigation, he learned that this copper piece came from a practitioner who had died a long time ago. This person wanted to imitate the sages and cross the starry sky to go to the Ruins of Wonders, one of the 4 great Tao ruins in ancient times. But after a bitter search for 48,000 years, he didn't get what he wanted and finally died with regret. This copper piece was regarded as a relic by this cultivator, and it was obtained by the blood leopard by chance before it fell into Lin Sun's hands. It was precisely because of this that Lin Sun inferred that this Taoist riding an ox ought to be related to one of the 4 great Tao ruins, the Ruins of Wonders. At this moment, Lin Sun took out the copper piece and made a slight comparison. He instantly noticed that the old man in a Taoist robe riding an ox on the copper piece and the thin figure on the starry sky fishing were obviously the same person. This painting really didn't have a simple origin. Lin Sun was shocked in his heart. Suddenly, his palm heated up, and he saw that the copper piece that was mottled with rust actually flowed with a strand of divine aura at this moment, and it surged into the starry sky fishing. Instantly, a shocking scene appeared. The originally yellowish and old painting seemed as if it had come to life at this moment, and it was suffused with a divine sheen. In the painting, the figure sitting above the starry sky suddenly let out a hearty laugh. Interesting. After waiting for endless years, the fated person has finally come. In this case, those who are willing to take the bait. As he spoke, he lightly shook the fishing rod in his hand, and a resplendent star was caught in the vast and boundless Milky Way. P.S. The upcoming gifts have been confirmed. There are Kindles, USB drives, Panda enamel cups, power banks, t-shirts, and crossword coins. Other than the 2 Kindles, there are a lot of other gifts. They are all custom-made and not for sale. Chapter 1209. Whoosh. Without giving Lin any time to react, the figure in the scroll threw the fishing rod, and a star that was caught flew out of the scroll. The next moment, Lin only felt a buzz in his sea of consciousness, which seemed to be about to explode. It was impacted by a motley and huge power of inheritance. At the same time, all kinds of enlightenment came to his mind like a tide. Void-breaking finger of divination. There are 3 movements in the Tao of longevity. First, instant of spring and autumn. One finger turns the spring and autumn, seizes fate and judges life and death. Second, close yet worlds. One finger breaks the world. The enemy is close at hand, but I am at the end of the world. Nobody can get close. Third, infinite distance. Once the finger is out, there is no way to avoid it. After a long time, Lin woke up from the enlightenment. His heart was full of shock. He realized that this was a peerless Taoism inheritance, which was above the 5 realms and specially prepared for the King of Longevity realm. Even though it was merely 3 moves, they contained boundless profundities within them. They were broad and profound, and possessed inconceivable might. Lin took a deep breath and suddenly looked up. He saw that the yellowish old scroll had already been restored to its original state. The figure was still in the starry sky, as if everything just now was just an illusion. But Lin knew that all this was true. Void-breaking finger of divination. Divination implied a perfect and flawless conception. This Tao art was grand, and it carried an extraordinary aura that was difficult to conceal. For example, the first movement, Instant of Spring and Autumn, integrated the atmosphere of spring and autumn into one finger, which was enough to overturn the universe, rotate the world, and crush the opponent with a dignified and majestic momentum. For example, the second movement, Close Yet Worlds. Even if the enemy came to attack, the opponent would not be able to touch him at all. This was a kind of defense method similar to Prison of Painting, but it was more magical and amazing. Imagine, how could the enemy get close to the place where he stood? For example, the third movement, Infinite Distance, no matter how far the enemy hid, there was no place that couldn't be reached by this finger. The three moves combined attack, defense and pursuit in one. The essence contained in them moved Lin Sun's countenance. After a long time, Lin Sun calmed down from the excitement. Staring at the yellowed old scroll, Lin Sun roughly judged that it was left by the old man in Taoist robe who rode a green bull. There were mysteries hidden within, and it was definitely not ordinary. However, one needed to be fated to trigger such a mystery. Just like what had just happened, it was triggered by the Taoist riding an ox painting in his possession, causing him to inadvertently obtain the inheritance of the sky-shattered divination finger. Those who are willing to take the bait. It should be those who are fated to take the bait. Lin Sun murmured in his heart that this senior left such a painting. Perhaps it was to wait for a fated person. Fishing in the starry skies, leaving behind an inheritance for those who are fated. Since the ancient times until now, how many people could possess such a transcendent and carefree bearing? Who was this old man in a Taoist robe who was riding on a green bull and looking up at the sky? Lin Sun quietly clenched the rusty copper in his hand. He had the premonition that when he had the chance to search for the ruins of profundity one day, then perhaps he would be able to find out the identity of this old man in Taoist robes. Immediately, another thing occurred to Lin Sun. Where did the branch of Golden Crow get this starry sky fishing painting? In the end, Lin Sun raised his hand and put away the ancient painting. I have to hurry up. When he walked out of the Hall of Golden Crow and stood on the Flying Star Mountain, a touch of determination flashed through Lin Sun's black eyes. Since he had started killing, there was no possibility of stopping. Whoosh! The next moment, his figure had disappeared. A quarter of an hour later, Wild Elephant Mountain, one of the small blessed lands in the distant Fire Realm, was now occupied by Xuandu Taoism sect and regarded as a place of residence. Lin Sun came and climbed the mountain to kill as he did before. In less than 10 minutes, all the successors of Xuandu Taoism sect stationed on the Wild Elephant Mountain were killed. The mountain was stained with blood and the ground was in a mess. When Lin Sun walked out of the Wild Elephant Mountain, he took away 9 king medicines and a batch of rare divine material, the flowing light cold essence, which was as valuable as the divine gold. The only pity was that there was no divine medicine on the Wild Elephant Mountain. Then, Lin Sun set out on a journey to the territory of the Sea Soul clan. At this time, the news that Lin Sun broke into the territory of Golden Crow alone, killed many peerless kings, and bathed the Flying Star Mountain in blood, had spread like a storm in the distant Fire Realm. In this battle, the Flying Star Mountain suffered a complete disaster. The major forces stationed there were defeated, and the casualties were incalculable. It was impossible to hide it. When the news came out, all parties were excited. The major forces distributed in the distant Fire Realm were all stunned and in disbelief. They couldn't sit still at all. One person took down the Flying Star Mountain? This seemed extremely inconceivable. Before, Lin Sun had been dormant in the Star Mountain. Although he killed several peerless kings one after another, it didn't cause too much of a stir. Because there were similar bloody conflicts every day in the distant Fire Realm. Unexpectedly, today's news far exceeded everyone's expectations. Lin Sun was indeed worthy of the title of Devil God. He washed the Flying Star Mountain with blood all by himself. His straightforward and efficient manner caused a great commotion among the onlookers. The news seemed to have grown wings and swept across the land. Everywhere it went, it caused a commotion, and Lin Sun's name entered the vision of the major forces. Many people trembled and were dumbfounded. Some of the major forces even sent their forces to the Flying Star Mountain to investigate the specific news in order to confirm its authenticity. But not long after, the news that the Wild Elephant Mountain was bathed in blood by demon god Lin spread, and it caused another uproar. Has demon god Lin gone mad? Many people felt their scalps go numb. Since the opening of the Upper Nine Realms, there were bloody conflicts in the distant Fire Realm every day. But it was the first time for someone like Lin Sun to overturn an overlord force and push his way forward. Everyone knew that in the distant Fire Realm, the Flying Star Mountain where the Golden Crow clan was located could completely stand among the overlords. Only colossal forces like the profound Sikh Sword School, the Heavenless Sect, and the Tai Daoist sect could compete with them. But now, the Flying Star Mountain and the Wild Elephant Mountain had been bathed in blood by demon god Lin alone. Who wouldn't be shocked? Even the major forces in the distant Fire Realm could not sit still. They sent their forces to investigate the news, eager to know what demon god Lin was up to. What? Even the Sea Soul clan's Mingtsue Mountain was bathed in blood? God, demon god Lin, he's going to pierce through the heavens. In the following period of time, more news spread like a storm, causing many of the major forces to feel insecure. They were all wondering if they had offended demon god Lin in the past. There were also major forces that seized the opportunity to send their elite forces, planning to fish in troubled waters. After all, Lin Sun was only one person. It was destined that he could not occupy all the blessed lands that he had conquered one after another. And these unoccupied blessed lands became delicious cakes in the eyes of the major forces. This was like a flock of vultures gnawing on the rotten meat left on the ground. What did you say? Demon god Lin attacked the Flying Star Mountain of the Golden Crow clan? At the same time, Wu Lingfeng and the others, who were waiting for Lin Sun's news on the Star Mountain, also got the news. They all flew into a rage, their faces turning green with anger. Who would have thought that when they came to raid Lin Sun's lair, their territory would be raided by Lin Sun? I'm so angry. Wu Lingfeng was so angry that he almost coughed up blood, his long hair flying in the air. Without hesitation, he led a group of powerful forces back at full speed. When they arrived at the Flying Star Mountain, Wu Lingfeng was a little stunned and almost couldn't believe it when he saw the blood and devastation all over the ground. This was actually true, especially when he saw that the 3 yin-yang divine lotuses within the pool had been completely plucked. His vision went black while the heavens and the earth spun, and he couldn't help but roar furiously and madly towards the sky. Their lair had been breached, and even their treasures had been plundered. Not a single decent thing was left. Ruthless. Too ruthless. When he walked into the hall and saw that even the ancient painting he had hung on the wall had disappeared, Wu Lingfeng was so angry that he almost went berserk. At the same time, the top figures of Xuandu Taoism sect, Sea Soul clan, and moon-worshipping cult were also frightened, but they also secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, demon god Lin attacked the Flying Star Mountain. If he ran wild in their respective territories, the consequences would be unimaginable. But before they could rejoice for a long time, news came one after another that Wild Elephant Mountain and Mingtsue Mountain were massacred. All of a sudden, they felt like they had been hit hard by a stick. They all looked ferocious, and their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They roared to find Lin Sun for revenge. Everyone, you've seen how rampant this demon is. If we don't kill him, how can we keep a foothold in the distant fire realm? Wu Lingfeng took a deep breath and controlled the anger and hatred in his heart with great perseverance. He said with a livid face, I suggest that we act together to kill this demon. We must not give him a chance to breathe and escape. Everyone nodded with a gloomy face. They also knew that Lin Sun couldn't be treated as an ordinary person since he could defeat the forces stationed on the Flying Star Mountain alone. This man was not only rampant, but his combat strength was also extremely terrifying. If it was a one-on-one fight, no one could be his opponent. Let's go. Wu Lingfeng didn't want to waste any more time, so he didn't even care about the Flying Star Mountain. Immediately, the others followed him with a murderous look. At the same time, Lin Sun stood in front of a beautiful spiritual mountain with a frown. This mountain was called Golden Mist, and it was originally the residence of the ancient mysterious Light Clan. But when Lin Sun arrived, he was surprised to find that there had been a large-scale bloody conflict not long ago. Smoke and dust were everywhere, and blood could be seen everywhere. Demon God Lin? You came at the right time. As you can see, Xianwen's Sword House has wiped out the territory of the ancient mysterious Light Clan for you. A group of strong figures walked out of the mountain, led by a handsome young man in a crane cloak. He looked indifferently at Lin Sun, who had just arrived. Xianwen's Sword House? Lin Sun thought of Ji Xingyao, an extremely proud girl. However, he had never had any relationship with Xianwen's Sword House. Why did they take the initiative to help him? Don't get me wrong. We didn't help you for nothing. I heard that you just massacred the Flying Star Mountain, so you must have obtained a lot of benefits. Shouldn't you take out some divine medicine to express your gratitude? Chapter 12:10. The young man spoke casually with a playful look on his face. It was as if he took it for granted. His name was Emo Tianhe, an ancient freak from the Profound One Sword House. Since he was born, he had never taken the top figures of the present age seriously. Now, he had reached the Peerless King realm. Not long ago, he took the test of the Liefire Battle Tablet and ranked 83rd on the Tianjiao Golden List. He was one of the most influential figures in the entire distant Fire Realm. Even Wu Lingfeng, the 9th prince of the Golden Crow sect, couldn't enter his eyes. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he smiled and said, Are you blackmailing me? Emo Tianhe shook his head and said, Blackmailing doesn't sound good. This is the way you should express your gratitude. After all, we helped you eradicate the dwelling of the mysterious Light Ancient Clan. Lin Sun sneered and said, Did I ask you to help me? Don't you think it's despicable for you to take this opportunity to blackmail me? Emo Tianhe's face darkened, and a touch of coldness flashed between his eyebrows. He said indifferently, Lin Sun, a wise man submits to circumstances. I've already given you enough face by asking you to pay some gratitude. If I want to deal with you, I don't need to do much. I just need to keep you here. When Wu Lingfeng and the others come, do you think you still have a chance to escape? This was a threat. The implication was that if Lin Sun obediently handed over some divine herbs, they wouldn't make things difficult for him. But if Lin Sun didn't hand them over, they could only keep him here. As time went by, Wu Lingfeng and the others would definitely come in time. At that time, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. Besides, you first destroyed the Flying Star Mountain, and then attacked the Wild Elephant Mountain and the Mingtsue Mountain. You must have consumed a lot of energy, right? Before Lin Sun could speak, Emo Tianhe said, It's not wise for you to be stubborn at this time. Don't just stand there. Hand over the divine herbs. The other experts of the Profound One Sword House said one after another, as if they were sure that Lin Sun would win. Lin Sun frowned and asked in confusion, Even if Wu Lingfeng and the others come, they won't give up if they see you occupy the Golden Mist Mountain, will they? Emo Tianhe immediately burst out laughing. His face was filled with arrogance as he said indifferently, You're very childish. You have no idea that after you attacked and conquered a few spiritual mountains, the other major forces have already moved out to fight for these territories. At this time, Wu Lingfeng and the others have no time. Because there are too many opponents. They will only vent their anger on you. After a pause, there was a touch of pity in Mo Tianhe's eyes. He stared at Lin Sun and said, "Do you understand? You have unintentionally helped a lot of forces and acted as a vanguard. You are the vanguard in the front, and these forces are seizing territories from the rear and reaping the benefits without doing anything." At the end of his sentence, he could not help but sigh. To think that you, demon god Lin, are also an impressive and ferocious figure. But now all your efforts have gone to the benefit of others. Lin Sun listened patiently and suddenly smiled. "So, are you going to take this opportunity to blackmail me?" Mo Tianhe frowned and said unhappily, "I'll say it again. This is not blackmail. If you are in the mood to continue, I'll accompany you. Anyway, the longer you delay, the greater the chance for Wu Lingfeng and the others to come in time." He was very calm, as if he was sure that he would win from beginning to end. The other experts of the profound One Sword House also looked playful. After hearing Mo Tianhe's words, they were not in a hurry anymore. At this time, Lin Sun made a decision and said, "You said that I unintentionally acted as a vanguard, but didn't you also act as my vanguard?" A trace of coldness flashed in Mo Tianhe's eyes. "What do you mean?" Lin Sun smiled slightly. "I took a fancy to the Golden Mist Mountain, but you got it before me. I don't blame you for being nosy, but you must hand over the treasures you got on the Golden Mist Mountain, and then you get out of here." The word "get out" was spoken casually. The faces of Mo Tianhe and the others darkened. They had already spoken to such an extent, but not only did demon god Lin not know his place, he even dared to blackmail them. This was intolerable. "Are you sure?" Mo Tianhe's eyes were like lightning, and they emitted a divine light that was like a blade. In an instant, his power became extremely terrifying. Lin Sun looked up at the sky, and then he withdrew his gaze and said, "There's not much time left. If you continue to be so long-winded, I might choose to go to the blessed land of the profound One Sword House." He didn't conceal his threat at all and seemed extremely magnanimous. This infuriated Mo Tianhe, causing his face to become even colder, and he said, "Very well, it seems that you intend to become the public enemy of all the forces in the distant Fire Realm. Then don't blame me for being rude." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, he had already stepped forward. An ancient sword suddenly appeared behind him, and it was brilliant like the sun and moon as it slashed down. The sword intent was so strong that it caused the world to dim. Clang! Lin Sun swung his fist horizontally, and the sword and fist collided, causing boundless light to erupt. Clang! Mo Tianhe's expression remained unchanged, and another ancient sword flashed out behind him. Its momentum was like a moving mountain and river, and it was majestic and vast as it crushed the void. At the same time, the ancient sword that was defeated by Lin Sun swept up again and slashed from one side. Its speed and decisiveness far exceeded that of an ordinary peerless king. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. He was a little surprised, and then he felt relieved. If Mo Tianhe didn't have the strength, how could he dare to extort him so openly? Boom! Without holding back, Lin Sun also exerted his true strength. The light around him flowed, and he deduced the mystery of the 9 strikes for shaking the heavens. "You're overestimating yourself." Seeing this, Mo Tianhe sneered. With a wave of his sleeve, a group of ancient swords swept out. Together with the 2 swords from before, there were a total of 36 swords, and they turned into a fierce and terrifying sword formation to kill. The ancient swords were all different. Some were brilliant like the sun and moon, some were towering like mountains, some were turbulent like the sea, and some were like the spring breeze and rain. There were myriad phenomena, and they echoed each other from a distance. In a trance, it was like 36 peerless sword cultivators had attacked together, and they deduced earth-shattering sword intent with the intention of slashing the world. Mo Tianhe was like the king of swords. He controlled all the swords and swept through the surroundings with extremely powerful might. He really deserved his reputation for being ranked on the Tianjiao Golden Ranking, and he had real confidence. Bang! 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 The sword chi crisscrossed and slashed down dazzlingly, and the power it emitted caused the world to fall into chaos. Rocks exploded, the ground was covered with ravines, and the void was torn open like a canvas. Only senior brother Mo Tianhe can deduct the power of the great void sword-seeking formation to such an extreme extent. The nearby experts of the profound Sikh sword school had excited expressions on their faces, and they were shocked by this scene. Demon god Lin can die without regrets under such a sword formation. Some people were looking forward to it. Boom! The dense rain of swords poured down, and it deduced infinite killing intent. It was profound and unfathomable, and it almost drowned Lin Sun's figure. After a short confrontation, Lin Sun realized that he had to go all out in order to defeat Mo Tianhe by relying on the 9 strikes for shaking heavens and the 9 changes of the Calamity Dragon. But it was slightly difficult to kill Mo Tianhe. Even though Mo Tianhe was extremely conceited, Lin Sun had to admit that Mo Tianhe was a formidable figure that he'd encountered since he'd grasped the King Dao laws, and Mo Tianhe was far stronger than an ordinary peerless king. But that was all. Clang! In the next moment, the snow-white broken blade flashed out, and it revealed a shocking sharpness. Haha, demon god Lin, you finally can't help but use your weapon? That's right, otherwise it would be too boring to suppress you. Mo Tianhe chuckled with a calm expression, and his entire body emitted a fierce sword intent that shot into the sky as he deduced the 36 ancient swords to the extreme. Every single sword strike contained earth-shattering might. Even though he was conceited, he knew that Lin Sun had utilized his strongest technique at this moment, so he didn't dare be careless in his heart, and his aura grew stronger and stronger. Boring! A cold sheen flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes, and then he heard the broken blade hum before it swept out like a river of stars. Star fishing slash. The broken blade shrouded in the power of the Tao of Water showed an invincible momentum. It moved across the void like the night had fallen, and it slashed down the stars in the sky. Although it was a vision, it was extremely horrifying. Bang! An ancient sword was shattered and wailed violently. In the distance, Mo Tianhe's body stiffened, and his qi and blood fluctuated. He suddenly restrained the contempt on his face and became serious. However, what happened next was completely beyond his expectation. The broken blade moved as if it was unstoppable, and it revealed great and boundless power. Bang! 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 The Taishu Xian seeking sword formation that was originally under his perfect control was completely messed up. The ancient swords wailed as they were shattered and scattered. The formation was scattered all over the place, and the formation was scattered. At the same time, Mo Tianhe seemed to have been struck by lightning again and again. He staggered back step by step, and his qi and blood were shaken to the point that he almost coughed up blood. His expression changed from seriousness to solemnity, and then from solemnity to shock, rage, and unsightly. He seemed to be in disbelief. The experts of the Xianwen sword school, who were excited in the distance, also changed their expressions at this moment. They were caught off guard and couldn't believe it. How could Demon Lin be so powerful? After all, Mo Tianhe had a chance not long ago, and his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had reached the fulfillment of the King of Extinction Realm, and he was only one step away from triggering the first longevity test. It could be said that in the distant Fire Realm, in terms of cultivation alone, there were no more than 5 King of Extinction Realm cultivators with such cultivation. But now, he still couldn't suppress Demon Lin, which was too unexpected. "Do you think it's interesting now?" Lin Sun asked at the same time. As he spoke, the broken blade swept through the air, and a burning sun cut rose up like a big sun exploding in the void, completely destroying the sword formation. Puff! Emotienha couldn't help coughing up blood again. His hair was disheveled, and his face was full of surprise and confusion. He was not convinced of his previous conceit and calmness. He said, You have just stepped into the King of Extinction realm, but why are you so powerful? There are still many things you don't know. Is it interesting to ask you? Lin Sun asked with a smile, and his black eyes were deep. Chapter 12:11. Dang. Mo Tianhe exerted all his strength to resist, but in the end the 36 ancient swords were slashed apart by the broken blade, creating a deafening collision sound. Mo Tianhe hurriedly dodged, barely dodging this strike. However, he'd already suffered a heavy injury. The skin, tendons, and bones in his entire body hurt intensely, and the vital energy and blood in his body roiled without end. As soon as he steadied himself, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. The disciples of the profound Inquiry Sword School were dumbfounded. Mo Tianhe was so arrogant and powerful that he was like a king of swords. However, in merely a short moment, he was beaten to the point of being powerless to resist. His hair was disheveled, and he dodged in a sorry state while coughing up blood incessantly. He was like a completely different person from before. Is it interesting? Lin Sun rushed up, pressed his palm and fingers, and the Swanee seal emerged. With a bang, he took the opportunity to smash Mo Tianhe into the Golden Mist Mountain not far away. His entire body was imprinted on the wall, and it looked very strange. Interesting, stop fighting. The disciples of the Profound Sikh Sword School shouted. All of them realized that Mo Tianhe would definitely suffer if the battle continued. Then let's do it again. Lin Sun smiled. As he spoke, he had already rushed to Mo Tianhe. He grabbed Mo Tianhe's ankle and smashed him to the ground like a stick. Bang! The ground cracked, and Mo Tianhe's handsome face had an intimate contact with the ground. He was in so much pain that his whole body twitched, and he let out a miserable howl. Looking at him again, he was covered in dirt and had a bloody nose and swollen face. It was simply too miserable. Lin Sun, you've gone too far. Mo Tianhe roared. He was about to go crazy. I'm just bullying you. What can you do to me? Lin Sun shook his wrist and exerted force in his palm. Mo Tianhe's body was shaken violently. He foamed at the mouth, became dizzy, and rolled his eyes. There was a series of crashing sounds, and some treasures fell to the ground. Thump! Then, Mo Tianhe was thrown away. Lin Sun's eyes fell on the treasures on the ground. The disciples of the Profound Inquiry Sword School in the distance gasped while their hearts trembled. Fiend God Lin is simply too brutal, but none of them dared to step forward to stop him. Even Mo Tianhe was not a match for him. How could they dare to look for trouble? This storage bracelet is not bad. Soon, Lin Sun selected his spoils of war, which was a simple emerald green bracelet, and put it away without hesitation. Seeing this, Mo Tianhe let out a heart-wrenching scream and rushed up to fight Lin Sun desperately. Because the storage bracelet contained all of his treasures, it was where his entire fortune was. Bang! Lin Sun kicked him away and said, Don't make me kill you. Mo Tianhe was stunned at first, and then his expression changed. Finally, he was disappointed. He was not stupid. He was just angry just now. Only now did he realize that if Lin Sun wanted to kill him, he could have done it just now instead of waiting until now. However, when he saw his storage bracelet falling into Lin Sun's hands, he still felt heartbroken and his heart was bleeding. At the same time, Lin Sun was also amazed that there were 2 miraculous medicines in the storage bracelet which were not inferior to star fruit. Apart from that, there were also more than 10 types of king medicines and a large batch of spiritual materials that were extremely rare in the outside world. Their value was immeasurable. I didn't notice that this fellow is really rich. Lin Sun stroked his chin and was considering whether he should kidnap Emo Tianhe and extort him in the territory of profound inquisition. Emo Tianhe's hair stood on end. What's with that look? Does he think I'm a fat sheep that can be taken at will? That's simply too detestable. As an ancient freak that came from the profound Sikh sword school, he'd always looked down upon the peak figures of the current generation. Yet now, he'd been suppressed and treated like a fat sheep. This was undoubtedly too humiliating, and it tortured him to the point he was on the verge of collapse. The expressions of the disciples of profound inquisition in the distance flickered, and they were extremely nervous. It could be said that demon god Lin could decide life and death with a single thought. How about this? I'll let Emo Tianhe go if you give me another miraculous medicine and 10 king medicines. Lin Sun made a decision. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they were so depressed that they almost coughed up blood. Does this fellow think miraculous medicines are cabbages? That they can be obtained at will? Not to mention miraculous medicines, even king medicines can't be obtained at will. Do you think his life isn't worth this? Asked Lin Sun. Emo Tianhe was infuriated to the point he almost gnashed his teeth into pieces. Can this even be compared? Lin Sun, it was indeed my heart control sword house that was in the wrong this time. Just as you said, I'll compensate you accordingly. Right at this moment, a clear and melodious voice resounded. Along with this voice, a graceful figure walked out from Gold Mist Mountain. She had curved brows, snow-white skin, and a pair of clear eyes that were jet black like paint. She wore white clothes and carried an ancient sheathed sword on her back. Her clothes fluttered as she walked, and she was like a female sword immortal that had walked out from the heavens. She was peerlessly beautiful, elegant, and otherworldly. Ji Xingyao, the current saintess of the number 1 sect in Shiheng world, profound inquisition. A trace of a daze flashed through Lin Sun's heart when they met again after a few years. In the past, Ji Xingyao liked to wear a black dress and had undisguised pride. She was like the moon that hung high in the sky, and she emanated a peerless, elegant bearing that caused others to turn their heads. But now she wore snow-white clothes, black hair that flowed down like a waterfall, and her figure was otherworldly and graceful. She was like an otherworldly celestial maiden that emanated an ethereal aura. She didn't have that radiant pride anymore, but it was even more impossible to ignore. It was even to the extent that her otherworldly beauty would make most cultivators feel ashamed of their inferiority. Obviously, Lin Sun had been constantly transforming in the past few years, and Ji Xingyao had similarly advanced by leaps and bounds on her path of cultivation. All the disciples of the profound inquisition heaved a sigh of relief in unison when they saw her appear. Emo Tianhe, who lay on the ground, had a stiff expression. He was in a sorry state at this moment, and his face was covered in dirt. But Ji Xingyao noticed this. He was slightly unable to raise his head. You were on this mountain just now, but why didn't you show yourself? Lin Sun asked curiously. Speaking of which, we can be considered as old acquaintances. Even though we can't be considered as friends, it's not good to avoid each other, right? Ji Xingyao was obviously stunned. Old acquaintances? As soon as these words were spoken, she couldn't help but recall the first time she met Lin Sun. This fellow had just arrived at the ancient desolation and was unknown. But he fought her to a draw at that time. It was precisely because of this battle that Ji Xingyao remembered Lin Sun. It couldn't be helped, Lin Sun could be considered as the first fellow who had bumped her butt, so it was difficult for her not to remember him. After that, she had met Lin Sun several times in succession, but every time they met, it wasn't pleasant, and it even made her gnash her teeth with hatred sometimes. However, in recent years, she had been wholeheartedly cultivating, and she had long since become indifferent to the past. She had thought that her temperament had transformed and was different from the past. But who would have thought that Lin Sun's words of old acquaintance directly caused her to have the impulse to gnash her teeth again, and even the state of mind that she had tempered with great difficulty showed signs of anger. This fellow has already stepped into the terminating king realm, so how can he still be so shameless? Who is an old acquaintance of him? If others heard this, they would probably think that I have an impure relationship with him. Ji Xingyao took a deep breath, and her clear eyes were cold as she controlled her emotions and said, "Is this question important?" Lin Sun laughed heartily and said, "Looks like you've gotten over it. That's good. As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. I told you that what happened all those years ago was a misunderstanding, but you just can't get over it and regard me as a scoundrel. Didn't I accidentally, during the battle?" Ji Xingyao was instantly embarrassed and annoyed when she saw that he was going to mention that embarrassing matter again, and she was utterly unable to control her state of mind. She reprimanded in a clear voice, "Shut up! Why are you still as shameless as before?" She was originally like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world, ethereal and transcendent. But at this moment, her almond eyes were wide open, her black brows were raised, and she gritted her teeth with hatred. Even the other disciples of the profound Inquisition sword school had never seen such an attitude. Especially when the conversation between her and Lin Sun was filled with many thought-provoking words, such as old acquaintance, scoundrel, misunderstanding, it was difficult for others to not have wild thoughts. Everyone, including Mo Tianhe, was surprised and bewildered. What's going on? Ji Xingyao was the current saintess of the profound Inquisition sword school. She was pure, and possessed peerless elegance. Countless people adored and respected her, and they took her to be a goddess that could be admired from afar and not desecrated. If news of this were to spread, then it was very likely that Ji Xingyao and demonic god Lin were entangled in some matters. Then it would absolutely be an extremely shocking event that would make many go mad. Lin Sun was slightly astounded, and then he sighed lightly. "Alas, I guessed wrongly. So it turns out that you haven't forgotten what happened in the past. Actually, all of us were very young at that time, and it's excusable for us to make some mistakes inadvertently. Just like this time, when I found out that these fellows were disciples of your profound Inquisition sword school, I didn't slaughter them, and wasn't it because we were acquaintances?" As soon as these words were spoken, it caused the expressions of Mo Tianhe and the others to become even more unusual. Indeed, with demonic god Lin's ferocious temper, it was obviously very unusual for him to not slaughter them earlier. Now it made sense that he hadn't done so out of consideration for Ji Xingyao. In this way, it could be inferred that the relationship between the two of them was definitely not ordinary. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but have a complicated expression. Ji Xingyao was a fairy-like figure that they admired and respected in their hearts. But now, she was entangled with demonic god Lin. This made them feel sour, envious, and a little depressed. Ji Xingyao didn't know what they were thinking. If she knew, she would definitely be driven mad with anger. Even so, when she heard Lin Sun's words, she was so angry that she couldn't help but laugh. "So, I have to be deeply grateful to you?" Lin Sun shook his head and waved his hand with a magnanimous look. "Not really. It's enough that you know the reason why I did this." Ji Xingyao suddenly opened her eyes wide and felt very depressed in her heart. Didn't this guy realize that she was mocking him? She was about to say something when she saw Lin Sun's black eyes narrow. He suddenly raised his head to look into the distance and said, "This is not a place to stay for a long time. Miss Ji, why don't we talk somewhere else?" "In your dreams." Ji Xingyao was so angry that she blurted out. This guy actually wanted to talk with her. Wasn't he afraid that she couldn't control herself and would punish him?